Once upon a time, there was truth in journalism, where brave men and women gave voice to the voiceless. But then the corporations bought the journalist, poisoning the news that we are fed. With those tainted sources, all we ever ate was a steady diet of status quo. This hijacked narrative hid the truth of mass suffering, injustice, and corruption throughout our land. Status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo. To expose this shift to oligarchy came a band of honest journalists. They left the studio and hit the streets to give the microphone back to the people. From sea to sea, the people were empowered to share their truth. Their voices no longer stifled, reclaimed their power. Join the media revolution now.
Hey there, Jordan Sheridan, live Sunday Marathon Labor Day weekend. It is September 1st, 2019, September 1st, 2019, and we got, so much to discuss, While the workers of America take a little break this weekend and tomorrow, I don't take breaks. Status quo, we are not in a position to take a break. But the workers should take a break. And I hope you are all taking a break. And thank you from the bottom of my little heart. And so you could see, status quo is my wardrobe today. Thank you very much for spending your part of your Labor Day weekend with status quo. We are live on Sundays, as you know, to try and raise money for Status Quo because we are a media startup and a media revolution. So instead of taking money from the very plutocrats that have really, if we want to be honest, folks, and a big part of the live stream today is going to be, the fact is, this is not really Labor Day. There really is no functioning or vibrant labor movement in the United Corporations of America. If you want me to give you rainbows and sunshine, I could do that, but let's be real. Now, there could be a renewed labor movement in this country with certain politicians in power, with certain movements following with that politician in power, but we might as well name Labor Day Oligarchy Day. Because really, what used to be the labor movement in the United States, which is now the United Corporations of America, as I always tell you, is really just oligarchy. Oligarchy, oligarchy, oligarchy. So, thank you for sticking with us. Some funky things have been going on with YouTube. Every time I start the stream, I get like a yellow. This is behind the scenes, but yellow means like the stream health is not great. So then I shut down the stream and I reset the settings, and then I get green, which means the stream is functioning at good strength. So what you could do for me, since I had to start and restart, we have a little bit of a lower audience. It's also Labor Day weekend, so there's not a lot of people live. That's why we are live. So make sure you press the share button. Share this stream so everybody knows we are live. This is a marathon. I don't know how long I'm going. It depends on you. How long you're willing to stick with me. Jen has taken the afternoon off so she could hang out with her kids. So it's just little old me, and definitely should hang out with her kids. You know, the kiddies is starting school soon. So obviously good to spend time with them. So I think Michael is in the audience. If you don't mind, one of our fine moderators here. Just follow me when I call for links and things like that. Just drop it in as best you can into the super chat, because it is a super chat. So before I start, and I have quite the wind up today. I'm not even getting into the presidential election at first, because I want to remind you how we got to this point where, frankly, this is not, I mean, they could call it Labor Day. This is not really Labor Day. because we don't really have respect for labor in this country. We don't have respect for the actual producers, the means of production. This is oligarchy day, and workers get a day off a year to celebrate themselves, even though, honestly, what workers really need to be doing is fighting to reclaim this once equal, not racially, but there was once a time that money was a little bit more equal in this country, and production was a little bit, the fruits of the labor was a little bit more equal. But as Status Quo covers over and over, the means of production have been stolen, have been hijacked, and this is grand larceny that has become an oligarchy. So we're going to give you a little educational background on that today. But before that, remember, smash the like button. The more people that press the like button, the more people that will see this live stream. We got 130 people watching so far. We got 88 of you have pressed the thumbs up button. So press that thumbs up button. It's right under the video. The more people that press that thumbs up button, the more people that will see the live stream. I'm going to skip membership for now. We'll get to that in a little bit. Follow us at Status Quo. We are now at 9,100 something followers on the Twitter. We want to get to 10,000 as soon as possible. It might look low. I mean, that is a low number for a media company, but really we were leveraging my personal Twitter for the first parts of this company. So now in the last 2 months, we've really started tweeting from Status Quo, and we're growing very quickly on at Status Quo, but we got to grow quicker so we could reach new audiences. That's one way for us to reach a new audience. So follow us at Status Quo. I'm at Jordan Sheridan. Subscribe to our podcast. That's bit.ly/Status Quo podcast. And join our email list by going to statusquo.com, and right in the field, you'll get a pop-up. Enter your email, because that is another great way for us to build our company and all those good things. And as a reminder, folks, for those of you who say, stop asking for money, then don't watch. Go away. Here we go. We are now at $68,000 and $68,225. So that is a little bit, what is that? A little shy of $17,000. Till we reach our goal of $85,000. We have had 1,510 of you donate to our GoFundMe. And as I always tell you, it's a little bit deceptive when it says 11 months, because remember, for those of you Status Quo OG subscribers, we were blocked, we were stopped from going live for 3 months. So make sure it's really, we've raised almost $70,000 in that GoFundMe in just 8 months, really, which is awesome, awesome, awesome. And I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. I know a lot of you are tapped out. I know a lot of you just paid rent because it's September 1st. I know a lot of you live in paycheck to paycheck. If you can't donate, we get it, no problem. If you can, the minimum is $5. Any amount counts, $5, $10, $20. Some of you have left even bigger. I would say, hey, today we're almost we're at a little over 68,000. Let's get to 69,000, and don't you make jokes. No jokes. 69,000. Let's get there, and maybe we could even head over and see what we could do to get to that 70,000 mark. I am not a naive person. We're not going to get to $85,000 overnight, but I will tell you, because I always keep it real, we need the money to travel and cover the campaign. Another $17,000 would make a big difference. That's probably average trip costs $2,000 to $3,000. So, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Give or take, that's about 8 or 9 trips we could take to cover the campaign. And we need it. Because honestly, what I'm going to show you today, I mean, if you thought 2016 was something as far as the corporate media, if you thought 2016 was bad, as far as the corporate media, my God. I mean, the Washington Post, their fact checkers, apparently just fact. In elementary school, you had a little definition of this is a fact, this is opinion. Well, apparently, the Washington Post itself is confused about what facts are anymore when it relates to Bernie Sanders. We're going to get to that in a little bit. We also have a great interview I did with a father who lost his son tragically. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago. I'm interviewing him again. He had a $20 unpaid bill. $20. unpaid bill on his health insurance. So his health insurance cut him off. They discontinued his health insurance. He had depression, some psychotic features, and because he didn't have his medicine that he needed for his mental stability, he superglued his seatbelt and unfortunately drove into a river, ending his life. Well, that father is taking his grief and trying to make it into something positive. So he is fighting for Medicare for all, and he also has words for Senator Kamala Harris, who referenced his son's suicide when she was for Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all plan. She used his son's story to try and prop up her as a fighter for Medicare for all, when in reality, she's nothing of the sort and has moonwalked away from Medicare for all very, very quickly. Oh, wow, we already got a donation. Thank you, Patrick Coyne, $27 in the GoFundMe. Really, really appreciate it. And Michael Cram, $50 yesterday. And Robert Escher, $50 yesterday. So we're now at $68,252. Thanks so much, Patrick. Really appreciate it. And of course, I mean, we're trying to grow our GoFundMe, but for whatever reason, if you'd rather do Super Chat, this is a Super Chat. So, and I'm going to keep reminding you, because those of you who say, Jordan, stop asking for money. First of all, would you rather me behind closed doors ask plutocrats for money? Would you rather me ask Bank of America for money? Or Pfizer? Or Raytheon? Or ExxonMobil? Which one do you prefer? And I'm asking you for money to go report in the field to cover stories no one else is, some of which we're going to cover today. So, and by the way, hello to our friends on Periscope watching, share us on Periscope, and all that stuff. So, to start, I want to play a clip from you. This is from Bernie Sanders, I want to start with a clip from Thomas Frank. And a lot of this is going to be a Labor Day theme, which I'm renaming now Oligarchy Day. This is Thomas Frank talking about his book, Listen Liberal, and the origins of how we started shifting away from labor to basically a winner-take-all society. And shocker, the shift away from labor to the professional class, to the managerial class, to a bought-off political system, had a big part in that was the Democratic Party now telling you, vote blue, no matter who. Here we go.
What the thesis of Listen Liberal, what I write about in Listen Liberal is how the Democratic Party changed from being a party that really cared about blue-collar workers, working class people, to being a party that cares about a very different group.
Did it actually care? And even Roosevelt, when he originally ran, he certainly wasn't running on a stimulus plan. He wasn't running on a big jobs program.
Did they genuinely care?
Well, let me just add one point to it. Are they simply more farsighted when it comes to systemic solutions? Like Roosevelt knew that if you want to keep any form of modern democratic capitalism,
yeah, it has to be reformed.
You need to have a jobs program and such, or you're going to be dealing with some kind of fascism in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's exactly right. But towards the sort of end of the New Deal era, like in the 1960s, labor unions were very powerful within the Democratic Party. Members of Congress often came from a blue-collar background, came up through organized labor. That sort of thing was fairly common in those days. This is not to say that they were ever a perfect party or anything like that, but there has been a real shift, not a cosmetic shift, but a real shift.
Doesn't that actually begin with Truman?
Like with Truman.
Yeah, like Vice President Wallace, Roosevelt's vice president.
Oh, no, you're right. There's
been a real
fights.
Progressive,
sure,
and then you have kind of a coup against Wallace.
Yeah.
The unions want Wallace as to become the vice presidential nominee.
Yeah.
And in '45, it's kind of a coup within the party, and they dump Wallace and bring in Truman.
I know, but I considered that that stuff was too far outside of the focus of Listen Liberal. I started in the late 1960s, which is, there was an enormous change in the Democratic Party. A lot of it for the better. This is in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, when the Democratic Party decided to sit down and reform itself. And they basically decided to remove organized labor from its structural position within the Democratic Party. This is the famous McGovern Commission in the early 1970s. Now, some of the things they did were very good and very healthy. And in their defense, I mean, by the way, once they do this, once a party of the left, which is unfortunately what the Democrats are in our system, once a party of the left decides that it's no longer going to be a voice of working class people and instead is going to be a voice of a different group, namely affluent white collar professionals, which is what they deliberately chose in the early 1970s. They chose to make this transition. When that happens, things like the inequality, the situation that we're in today, are inevitable. When that's the left party in your system has decided that they don't really care about the fate of working class people, what we have seen come to pass is inevitable. Now, in their defense, no one in 1971 would have seen that coming. I mean, the America was at its probably most equal state ever, like the high watermark of social equality, or economic equality in this country, where you had very famously back in those days blue-collar people living next door to white-collar people. They have both live in ranch houses in the suburbs or whatever, and the difference would mainly be a matter of taste. Commentators, it's like sociological commentators used to write about this all the time, like this guy drinks Budweiser, this guy drinks martinis, this guy drives a Chevy, this guy drives a Buick, you know, but they earn the same amount. And that's who we were in this country.
The upper stratum of mostly unionized workers were making similar money.
So that was Thomas Frank describing what his book is about, Listen Liberal, which I would very much recommend you. Credit to The Real News. He was doing an interview with The Real News, which is a great progressive channel, independent media. So what I wanted to set it up with that is to then play you a part of Bernie Sanders. If you have any sleeping issues, I've done this before. A part of Bernie Sanders' now infamous 2010 filibuster, which I think is instructive to the Democratic Party's shift. So Thomas Frank is talking about the Democratic Party's shift in 1970. Really, if you know political history, a really wrong reaction to George McGovern's defeat to Richard Nixon. So the Democratic Party said, oh, well, you know, a progressive populist candidate got crushed by Richard Nixon, so we have to totally abandon our New Deal roots, which have created a mostly equitable society. Not for black people, let's be clear, but for white people, a mostly equitable society in terms of income. CEOs made maybe 15, 20 times a worker. Well, let's fast forward Bernie Sanders in 2010. This was just part of his 8-hour filibuster. And by the way, reminder, we got 240 people watching. 160 of you have pressed that like button. So I need 100 more. Press the thumbs up button right under the video. The more people that press the thumbs up button right under the video, the more people that will see this. It's also Labor Day weekend, so maybe people don't know we're live. YouTube doesn't notify everybody that we're live. It doesn't show up in people's stream. So you could be a status quo ambassador. Press the thumbs up button, press the share button, share it on your social media, all that stuff. Let's take a look at what Bernie said during his filibuster in 2010.
As part of the Republican agenda, they want to expand, and it's not only Republicans here, I must say, some Democrats as well. They want to expand our disastrous trade policies so that large companies in this country can continue their efforts to outsource American jobs to China and other low-wage countries. I think any objective analysis of our trade policies have shown that it has been a grotesque failure for ordinary Americans. Hard to calculate exactly, but I think it is fair to say that we have lost millions of decent-paying jobs. During the Bush years alone, some 48,000 factories in this country shut down. We went from 19 million manufacturing jobs to 12 million manufacturing jobs. And in this country, historically, manufacturing jobs were the backbone of the working class of this country. That's how people made it into the middle class. That's how they had decent health care benefits, decent pensions. And every day, we're seeing those jobs disappear. because corporate America would prefer to do business in China or other low-wage countries. I returned from a trip to Vietnam last year, beautiful country. People there work for 25, 30 cents an hour. Sometimes when you go to a store, you may see a shirt made in Bangladesh. That shirt, in all likelihood, is made by a young girl who came in from the countryside into the city, one of the factories there. Now, the good news is that in Bangladesh, the minimum wage a number of months ago was doubled. Minimum wage in Bangladesh was doubled. It went from 11 cents an hour to 23 cents an hour. Are American workers going to be able to compete against desperate people who make 23 cents an hour? So my view, and I think it reflects the views of the American people, is that of course we want to see the people of Bangladesh and the people of China do well. But they don't have to do well at the expense of the American middle class. We do not have to engage in a race to the bottom. Our goal is to bring them up, not us down. But one of the results of our disastrous trade policies is that in many instances, wages in the United States have gone down. I believe that in the coming months, you're going to see an intensification of efforts to expand unfettered free trade. I think that will be a continuation of a disastrous policy for American workers.
So that was Bernie Sanders in 2010, so almost a decade ago, speaking out against the Bush tax cuts, speaking out against the extension of the Bush tax cuts by a Democratic president, then President Obama, and giving a little history lesson on just how do we get here to this point where we keep giving tax cuts to the wealthy, where we have grotesque income inequality, which has only gotten worse in the last decade since he made that speech. And thank you. Just got $7 from Patricia on the GoFundMe, $5 from Lawrence, $10 from Tony, and Patrick, $27. So we're now at $68,274. Keep it coming if you can. Status Quo is live because we are trying to grow as an independent, keyword, independent media revolution. We do not take money from corporate power. We do not take money from plutocrats. We do not take money from the very Democratic and Republican Party donors that are destroying this country and have made a joke at a demolition of the labor movement. Also, let me give a shout out. We got some super chats too. I don't want to miss you great folks contributing. Kelly Elaine, $10 in the super chat. Hey Jordan, someone on previous tech support community posts mentioned a direct payment through PayPal taking far less than YouTube, GoFundMe, and Patreon, a fraction of the cost, all straight to you. Thank you, Kelly. I think, I'll have to ask Jen, I think there's a direct PayPal way to donate to us as well. So I'll ask Jen about that. PJ Coin, I always get it wrong. I think that's euros. €6. Doing my best to spread the Bernie message in Ireland. People can't believe if you get cancer, you have a chance of going bankrupt. We will talk about that medical bankruptcy because Bernie Sanders has now offered a plan to eliminate medical debt in the United States of America or the United Corporations of America. Thank you for the super chat. I would love. I've always wanted to see Ireland. I hear it's beautiful. Smasher Dragon 11, $5 in the super chat. I send you an email and a petition for you to spread about Tyson wanting taxpayers to pay for a water plant that they have enough money to pay for. All right, we will check that out. If you send it to info at statusquo.com. Info at statusquo.com. Thanks for the super chats. So, Bernie talked about wages. I talk about wages a lot. If you don't know, as we celebrate Labor Day, which again should be renamed Oligarchy Day because we don't really have a labor movement in this country. Yes, you're starting to see more workers striking. You're starting to see more teachers striking and having victories, thankfully. You're starting to see more communications workers striking. We've seen Verizon, now AT&T. You're starting to see people fighting back, which the oligarchy and their allies in corporate media, they want to make workers feel the fight has been lost and will never be won, so why bother holding up your signs? Why bother walking out? this is the way it is and is going to be. That is the mentality they want you to have because of charts like this. I mean, chart kind of tells itself, doesn't it? Look at the productivity skyrocket for American workers since basically the 1970s. I mean, that starts all the way in the 1950s, but look at still, wages were going up a little bit 1970 to 1980. 1980, this is only through 2010. I don't have an update all the way now. This is 2010. That is not, just something that happened. That is a bank robbery. This is an intentional theft of your labor where the wages are not going to you. The wages are going to the vultures exploiting your labor on Labor Day. That's where all that productivity went, that red line. That is where the productivity is going. But in the corporate media, that's not a topic for discussion because the corporate media, as status quo always tells you, the corporate media exists to not cover this in front of you, to cover it up. That's what the corporate media's job is, to cover up these issues. And the corporate media has helped keep that in place by not covering it, by making it seem like America, all you got to do is dream big and work hard and you'll get ahead. No, the corporate media is complicit in this. And frankly, when you have pretty much members of the top 1 to 10% seizing the means of information in this country, well, no shock. You're going to get information, branding, and messaging from the top 1 to 10%, not the rest of us. And I think this is shown in a recent study. And all of this is going to make sense. I'm doing a bit of a build-up till I get to the latest with Bernie's campaign. Look at this. CEO compensation has grown 940%. 940% since 1978. There's something very wrong here, folks. 940% since 1978. From this study, the increased focus on growing inequality has led to an increased focus on CEO pay. Corporate boards running America's largest public firms are giving top executives outside compensation packages. Average pay of CEOs at the top 350 firms in 2018 was $17.2 million, or 14 million using a more conservative measure. Stock options make up a big part of CEO pay packages, and the conservative measure values the options when granted versus when cashed in or realized. CEO compensation is very high relative to typical worker compensation by a ratio of 278 to 1 or 221 to 1. In contrast to the CEO to typical worker compensation ratio was 20 to 1 in 1965 and 58 to 1 in 1989. CEOs are even making a lot more, about 5 times as much as other earners in the top 0.1%. From 1978 to 2018, CEO compensation grew by 1,007.5%, 940% under the options realized measure, far outstripping S&P stock market growth and the wage growth of very high earners. In contrast, wages for the typical workers grew by just 11.9%. That's also known as the booming economy. The booming economy. One where the pay of CEOs has risen 940% in 3 decades. Nothing wrong with that. It's obscene. Absolutely obscene what is going on in this country. The theft and the dishonesty that our media perpetrates to defend that theft. Oh, Jeff, oh my God, Bernie Sanders criticizes the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos is a patriot. Jeff Bezos and his ilk are the reason America is that shining city on top of a hill. He creates so many jobs for so many wonderful people, and people like him. How dare Bernie Sanders say there's gambling at this establishment? Now remember, this is a super chat. Also remember, we got 340 people watching. 240 of you have pressed that like button. Press that like button. The more people that press the like button, it's that thumbs up right under the video, the more people that will see the live stream. So I've now set up to you. And by the way, I could give you a gazillion illustrations. Here's just one. Lowe's spent billions on share buybacks, zero on severance for laid off workers. This was recent. Lowe's roughly 300,000 employees are without question the home improvement chain's greatest asset, according to their boss. He offered the shout out at the retailer's annual shareholders meetings in May, crediting a 15% boost in the company's quarterly dividends to his workers' efforts. Yet, when thousands of those workers recently got the boot, they received no notice and no severance. Instead, Lowe's, a profitable company that spent billions buying back its own stock, offered the equivalent of 2 weeks transition to pay full-time workers, some with the company more than a decade. Laid-off workers were also invited to reapply for jobs at Lowe's, though not necessarily for the same pay. Oh, wow. How kind. No notice. No severance. What Lowe's just did there, if you ever watched The Hunger Games, is the equivalent of, chopping off one of the participants' heads in the Hunger Games. And then, when they have the celebration, that scene, they put up the head and be like, we wouldn't have this event without this fine head that we've chopped off. Thank you for your participation. Whoever was the recent to get murdered in the Hunger Games. Smash Dragon 11, $2. I emailed the petition to your email. You got it? I'll have to look after I'm live. Haven't seen it. I can't look right now. But thank you for the super chat, and keep the GoFundMe going, baby. We are very close to 68,300. Can I get 68,300? That's why we're live when everybody else is at the beach, baby. We're trying to raise money to fund the in-the-field reporting that no one else is covering. So I set this up. For you, giving the history of how we got here on Labor Day. Because status quo over the last year, frankly, has been one of the only outlets that I know, I'm not saying this to toot our own horn, I'm just saying it because it's true, to actually go out across America and speak with workers. We've been one of the few to go out and give the workers that are having their wages stolen, are having their health care cut, that are getting laid off with no notice, that are getting laid off with little to no severance, that are having, frankly, in my view, economic terrorism perpetrated against them. We're one of the few that have gone out to actually give these people a voice and to actually show what is going on. Let me remind you, we have a lot of new subscribers. We're actually about to hit 62,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. Let me remind you, when General Motors decided to lay off 15,000 workers a couple months ago, we went out and we interviewed those workers and we covered it on the ground, thanks to the GoFundMe, thanks to membership, which, by the way, we are now at 697 Status Quo members. That's a little outdated. 697 members. Become a member, statusquo.com/join. $5 to $10 a month. Helps fund real in-the-field journalism. That is the DNA. That is the pulse of Status Quo, is membership. So if you can't, if you have $5 to $10 a month, I think it's well spent. That goes along with our patrons. So we're now over 1,000 total between membership on our website and patrons. But we want to get this membership number way, way up, because that will help us become the preeminent in-the-field journalist. There's great independent media out there, but there's not a lot of media journalists in the trenches, in the field. And that's where you get the most truth. That's where you actually put a face to the systemic barbarism of this Hunger Games economy. So that's why I'm not calling it Labor Day. I'm calling it the Economic Hunger Games, and I'm calling it Oligarchy Day. You don't like it? Tough. That's the truth. So I want to remind you, this was when General Motors laid off 15,000 workers. We were there. I want to remind you. Sorry if some of you have seen this, but for those who haven't, this is what's happening all across America. Whether it's GM, whether it's Lowe's, whether it's Sears, whether it's Target, Walmart, Burger King, McDonald's. Workers and citizens are just numbers on a balance sheet. They don't care if we breathe. They don't care if we eat. They don't care if we exist. Let's take a look. Memory lane. This was at a union hall as workers were fighting back against General Motors laying them off. Who is actually creating that profit for those investors, for those shareholders? It's not the shareholders. It's not the executives up in the offices. It's the workers on the assembly line. So what you have here is essentially corporations that have bought off our government. A lot of politicians, including Nancy Pelosi, by the way, take money from General Motors every year.
Right now, as you all know, our plant is one of those that's been unallocated. And we're trying to, bide our time. Our plant is going to be in a very precarious situation because we're the last plant to go. So it's going to affect how our membership can move to other facilities. And right now, it looks like some of us may have to go to Texas or Tennessee, and it may force some of us to retire that aren't really ready to retire. So I hope that you guys will continue to support us and the people that aren't a part of the UAW that supply the parts for General Motors. Those people will be disenfranchised, as well as the businesses that we support, the stores in our communities that we support, the community service that we are a part of. All of these people are going to be affected. Our schools, anybody that wants to buy a home, it's like that trickle-down effect, okay? As, was it Ronald Reagan gave us that trickle-down effect? Well, this is the real trickle-down effect.
That's coming, all right, great. I do want to make one thing clear, though. I did not come here to sing to you or at you. I came to sing with you. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union.
As I speak, there are graduate students who are also members of the UAW who are right now in Manhattan demonstrating in front of the GM building against the plant closures and on behalf of international solidarity. And there were 300 souls at the auto show demonstrating, saying no to the plant closures. And we have a better idea. Rather than closing these plants and creating all this waste, why don't we convert these plants for a new economy, for renewable energy, keep the electric car, and manufacture for the future and retain the jobs that we currently have. We have a major battle on our hands, and that's why we were demonstrating. We have a battle about, are they going to close this plant without a fight? Are they going to close Detroit Hamtramck Assembly without a fight? Are they going to close Brownstone and so on? Are we going to put up a struggle and say, this is absolutely a travesty, and for the sake of not only our jobs, not only the community, as Ghana was mentioning earlier, but there's something about the fact that we have a union here, that once that plant closes, this building will no longer be the node of unionism that it's been for so many years.
Flint is an inspiration to us all, to me in particular. I had a chance to work with some women who were a part of the Flint sit-down strike who had left out of the history. I worked on a little film called With Babies and Banners, the story of women in the Flint sit-down strike. And they had been left out, and Lorraine Gray and Bolin and Lynn Goldfarb did a wonderful job. And I had a chance to work for them and meet the what we referred to as the Flint Ladies. And the Flint Ladies, let me tell you, I wish I could spend more time telling you about the Flint Ladies, but I'll just give you one quick little anecdote. A woman in her 70s, looks like a sweet church lady. Central Casting sent over a sweet church lady. And she's sitting there and she says, and of course we all had blackjacks. They were made for us by the skilled workers. And we had them on a wristlet. And you just give your wrist a snap, and there you had a weapon. And nobody knew where it came from.
So White Shirt Day is fundamentally about the dignity of work and that we are all equal, right? Whether you're blue collar, whether you're white collar, but I would go even further and say whether or not you're service sector, whether or not you're an undocumented worker working in the fields, no matter what side of an imaginary border that you live on, we are all the same. And to me, that's what wearing a white shirt represents, the fundamental dignity of work.
So stop buying anything. And when they go into negotiations, here's the situation. Across the board, we're not buying nothing. No cars. Not Ford, not Chrysler, not GM. Not negotiate. I got my money in my pocket because I'm already suffering. You got 30, 40,000 people going on the street. I'm just wondering, and the last thing is, if you raise $1 billion, $1 trillion, why don't you become the head of the board or the stockholders' money? Can y'all become stockholders and own the stock and then run your company like you said you wanted to do? Renewable energy, start raising your money. You got all these people, you're the community. I'm speaking from a community. I'm in Detroit. I'm speaking on behalf of Detroiters. Yeah, I work at the plant. I ain't talking about that right now. I'm coming to you from Detroit, from my community, of people that have been targeted for generations, young people. And you know what? They're not going to have a community. I get out in my community. They don't know what to do. They ain't never been through this before. And all of them, well, what are we going to do? You're going to stop spending your money like the little rapper said.
We really can't go back. We have to go on. We have to go on. And the way we're going to go on is not to produce individual cars, but to produce what we need for the 21st century, a mass transit system. And what does that mean? That means electric buses, it means trams, it means small vehicles, it means railroad cars, and that's something that we can make in this area. Okay? Now, actually, I am also from the American Axle plant, and I understand that our plant, if it hadn't been destroyed, would have been great to have turned into wind turbines. So there's other things, too, that we can do. And that's what the folks who came together around the demonstration at the auto show were trying to say is, we will not accept that GM is going to shut these plants down. And if they can't, look, the taxpayer money and the workers own our plant, not GM, and we should take it over, and we should ask the city council to help us to sit down and plan and decide and move on from there. And so we have to be involved in this huge discussion, which has to involve the community and workers, and really a vision and a strategy that's very different from what we've seen before, because there's a restructuring going on, and that restructuring doesn't leave any room for us. So we have to restructure so that we can save our planet.
My name is Bobby Spiegler, and I'm a retiree from UAW Local 6000 state employees. I also was an auto worker for a while and a steel worker. I just wanted to speak to one issue that was sort of raised and sort of not, and that is blaming the Mexican auto workers. Blaming the Mexican auto workers. This was a large theme that was at the UAW sponsored rally downtown at Hart Plaza on January 18th. And it is not the fault of the Mexican auto workers, as somebody else spoke about here. And we have to build solidarity in other countries, and that includes Mexico, and to have confidence in auto workers there, and they're not our enemy. And this is a huge propaganda front, and it's not really putting the blame where the blame belongs, which is on General Motors. And I only say this because it was disheartening to see other UAW members with these slogans on their backs, including our brothers and sisters from Canada. That's another country. We don't go around saying, well, it's the Canadian auto workers' fault because we're having plant closures here. And I think that this is a very divisive and something that we have to really educate our membership on. And I guarantee that a lot of that theme is going to be brought up at the UAW convention.
I feel so emotional today because when I started working at the UAW in 1977 at Solidarity House, there was a sign outside in front of Solidarity House that said how many UAW members they had. At that time, they even had the Canadian workers as part of the union structure at that time. When I sat here today and talked to President Ghana, and I found out how the membership has dropped in this local, it was so depressing to me. But I was somewhat uplifted when I heard the brother talk about some of the solutions. But I think that as a community, we have really got to work hard to bring what we once had back. When I went to the UAW, it was flourishing. We had so many members, and we were so proud to have so many members. But as the membership dwindled, the sign went down. I don't like what's going on in this country, and I know that all of us in this room are very depressed about what's going on in this country. So I want to work jointly with UAW because, like I said, what happens to you as a member of OPEIU and a secretary at the UAW, it's going to impact me. Maybe it might even impact my pension. I don't know. But I want to commit the Coalition of Labor Union Women because we do have 28 different unions represented in our chapter, which includes UAW members. I want to work jointly with you so that we can see what we can do together. Because we know, as one of the brothers said already, what an injury to one is an injury to all. Thank you.
So that was footage from a trip we did. That was footage we did from a trip in Michigan. We also stopped in Ohio to cover the layoffs at General Motors just months ago. And meetings like this, and workers speaking up, and workers strategizing, and workers fighting back, are rarely covered. You know, sometimes you have cameras at worker strikes by workers. Sometimes you have, you know, some coverage, but you don't really hear from workers. You don't have media going not only when things go wrong, but to show workers actually when they're fighting back, to fight things going wrong. And that's what we've been trying to do, and that's what we want to do on a much, much grander scale. So, hold on, SBA is next step. That's what we want to do on a much, much grander scale. But I think there's something important. I think there's something important to point out here. Although I agree with a lot of the folks who spoke that day. Although I agree with a lot of what they're saying. What I don't Jordan, you might move the camera closer. Steve, unfortunately, I'm doing things all on my own. Don't have a full-time cameraman right now. We have posted a job for a full-time cameraman / editor, and we're going to start reaching out to people we want to interview over the next few weeks. But at the moment, I don't have a full-time camera person. So if there's a little bit too much headspace or the camera isn't perfect, it's because I'm doing it all on my own. And sometimes in life, you got to say, I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. Technical stuff and camera and lighting and audio is not my specialty. So I'm just happy we're live and functioning today. But we're working on it. So, what was not mentioned there, and somebody said there's no going back. I disagree with that, because I disagree with this, some of you might like him. I disagree with this Andrew Yang mentality that automation is inevitable, that the jobs of yesterday, the manufacturing jobs, all those things are never coming back to the United States, and we just need to, submit to that, and we'll just hand out money to people, but those jobs are not coming back, and robots are going to replace people, and we can't again have strong labor unions. No, I don't agree with that. Sure, the jobs will be different, but there can be a lot of jobs made here in America, and there can be union jobs. But the problem is, there's been a systematic, not only attack on workers and labor, but a systematic hijacking of this country by corporations, by CEOs, by executives. And that seizure and that hijacking has made it so the brainwashing and the gaslighting is we could never have what we used to have. Those days are over. It's the economy of tomorrow, the jobs of the future. It's all part of a systematic campaign to basically say you can't have ice cream anymore. Eat your broccoli. That was yesteryear, the good days of yesteryear, where one parent could work and you could have vacations and live in a suburban lifestyle and have some benefits and some dignity. That's not the nature of the world we live in anymore. And that is not true. Why we can't have those things is because in our country, which I call the United Corporations of America, there has been a decision to put business, shareholders, CEOs, wealthy white men, a couple more wealthy white women in charge now, and the elites, and basically say we could only build an economy, we could only build a vibrant country economically if we have rich people getting richer. That's how everyone else will succeed. And that has been the lie the Republican Party has told, and frankly, the Democratic Party has been complicit in telling that lie. The Democratic Party might verbally speak out against that. The Democratic Party might verbally talk about the middle class and the workers and all this, but I don't really care what the Democratic Party says, just like I don't care what Kamala Harris says, or Joe Biden says, or Pete Buttigieg says. I care about what they do, and I care about what their money is. I care about where they are getting their money. I care about their consistency. And I would group Elizabeth Warren in with this because, frankly, she's been a little slippery on Medicare for All and other things. And she says she's a capitalist down to her bones. But at the root of all this that we're talking about is the evil, the barbarism, and the fraud that is capitalism. And thank you, Henry, $5 in the GoFundMe. We are now at $68,279. And if you just tuned in, we go live on Sundays to raise money for Status Quo. As you know, Status Quo, we're a little different from others in the independent media field. We respect everybody, in our space, in our sandbox, but we're trying to be preeminent journalists in the trenches, in the field. And that takes money. And the choice is, would you rather be like everybody else, get a big corporate conglomerate to fund you, and then water down all the stories you do, and just basically deliver propaganda masquerading as journalism? Or would you rather build from the ground up from the viewers? So since September of last year, so basically a year, we launched a GoFundMe. We're now at $68,279. It's very, very hard to keep a GoFundMe as far as the urgency of a GoFundMe, you know? It's been going on for a while. We focus on it here and there, and then we don't talk about it because we don't want to overwhelm you. But I hope we're so close to that 85,000, only $17,000 away. I hope if you got a few bucks to spare, you'll consider donating to the GoFundMe. Many of you have donated once, twice, 3 times, 10 times, 20 times. There are a lot of you who have done that. So thank you. Keep it coming. I'm hoping today we could get to that 69,000 mark. It's going to take a few heavy hitters, but every amount counts. I think the minimum is $5, and that's why I'm live today, because Sundays is our day to really, really try and raise some money the right way through you, the viewer. And as you know, I mean, status quo, we don't just talk about, hey, give us money and this is what we're going to do. We have showed you what we're going to do. We've been to Flint, Detroit, Cleveland, Virginia, Dallas, Seattle, Vancouver, Chicago, Las Vegas, California. We've been so many places in such a short amount of time. We're only about 14, 15 months old, and we haven't been traveling for most of it because we got to grow our money. We're also at 697 members, paying members. So if you're not a paying member, that's how we grow for the long term. Statusquo.com/join. You also get bonus content as a member. You also join us for our monthly members call. So that's statusquo.com/join. So I want to bring this all to the present. I want to bring this all to the present. And thank you, Kathy Lloyd, $25 in the super chat. Appreciate it, Kathy. That's very kind of you. I want to bring this now to the present because none of this that I am showing you, this exploitation, this demolition of you, the viewer, because most of you are the working class. None of this could happen without a media that, being charitable, is asleep. But if we want to be honest, it's a media that's very much awake, but it's a media that is part of the vultures. The media goes to the same cocktail parties with the vultures stealing your money. The media, basically, to exist in their model, not status quo's model, to exist in their model, they have to keep lying. They have to keep lying to keep access. So the corporate media needs to pretend Joe Biden is just going around the country and, it's just Joe being Joe, when he can't remember President Obama's name, when he can't remember what city he's in, when he can't remember which 2 cities just had mass shootings in the last 24 hours, when he can't complete a sentence without mumbling and stuttering. They just like to pretend that, it's just gaffes. Because Joe Biden being president or being the nominee, their business model and their profit depends on nothing fundamentally changing in this country. And no one, other than the New York Times, nobody applies to that more than the Washington Post, who, frankly, it's kind of laughable at this point for the Washington Post to pretend they don't have a political jihad against Bernie Sanders. I mean, if you read the Washington Post, it's extremely clear. That's what the Washington Post is. It is a campaign arm of the Democratic establishment to go against Bernie Sanders. And thank you, $10 from Anonymous. Really appreciate the $10. We're now almost at 68,300. Hopefully we can get to 68,300. My goal for today is 69,000, so we got quite a bit of work to do. Now, let's read, we're going to get into the Washington Post and their ridiculous fact check of Bernie Sanders. But first, I want to read something that I find just as appalling and dangerous, and that is what the Washington Post has consistently been doing. What the Washington Post has consistently been doing is trying to kind of compare Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump. and equate Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump. Thank you, PJ Coin, 10 euros. Workers vote. Thank you, thank you. This is a super chat too, so GoFundMe, super chat, whatever you prefer. So let's read along for just a little bit, because what the Washington Post is trying to do is try and persuade its readers, which mostly older establishment, that Bernie Sanders is, kind of, he's got different policies, but he's basically Trump with his scorched earth campaign, they call it, against the media. This from the Washington Post. One scorching Saturday afternoon in July, some 70 supporters of Bernie Sanders crammed into a community room at a library here for one of the campaign's organizing sessions. The event, a reunion fraught with both anger and nostalgia for the last presidential cycle, was just a few miles from where the senator's supporters had erupted during the state's contentious 2016 party convention. "We were not defeated, we were cheated," shouted one woman from the back of the room. "Who's a little bit angry? Who's ready to work?" a campaign staffer asked the crowd. Questions met with raucous applause. Among those shouting loudest was Marcia Armstrong, a 63-year-old who lives in nearby Henderson and works in customer service for a property management company. She said she was trying to find some positivity and motivation in her frustration, but others, who believed the electoral process was rigged by the Democratic National Committee 3 years ago, were less optimistic. Quote, "I think they're just fed up with the whole system, and some of them feel that nothing can be done to change it. I disagree," she said. "I try to be positive." In 2016, Sanders and his supporters shared a visceral anger at the nation's economic and political systems, which they contend had been corrupted by wealthy capitalists. Hillary Clinton proved the perfect foe for an anti-establishment campaign. But with a sitting president who has also used anger to galvanize his base and claims to represent the antithesis of the Washington elite, some now find that aggressive messaging unappealing. Here is exactly what I'm talking about, folks. This is the complicity that tries to prop up corporate power, and in the Washington Post case, try and paint those fighting corporate theft, corporate greed, corporate barbarism as somehow dangerous. This is, if you want to say reverse psychology, I think that would be a charitable definition. Here's what they're saying. Oh, but like a sitting president who's used anger to galvanize his base. Some now find Bernie Sanders' aggressive messaging is unappealing. And what is complicit and subtle, well, not subtle, in this messaging? And thank you, Michael Bloom, $10 in the super chat, volunteer for Bernie. Thank you, Joe White, $5 in the super chat, always on point, keep on going. I'll keep on going as far as you take us. Thank you for the super chat, and keep it coming in the GoFundMe. I don't have Jen today. She's spending some necessary time with her kitties, so I'll put the GoFundMe chat. We got 400 viewers watching right now. Make sure if you haven't pressed the like button, press that like button. So what's complicit in this is the Washington Post trying to tell its viewers, on one side is somebody calling Mexicans drug lords, rapists, and criminals. On one side is calling for a ban of Muslims. On one side is saying grab women by the genitals, whether they like it or not. On one side is somebody calling, women they don't like fat pigs. On one side is basically calling, immigrants, they're stealing your jobs. Immigrants are, bad hombres. Calling Mexican judges, not possible to be unbiased. So that anger, which by the way is not anger, that's called racism. A lot of it's built on economic insecurity, which is real, but a lot of it's also built on racism. They're trying to compare that anger, with trying to provide universal health care for all people, trying to provide essentially universal education. Everybody goes to college, public college, for free. Trying to save the planet from, carbon dioxide and methane, melting the rest of the ice caps and basically flooding us all out. trying to, maybe give workers like a little more than crumbs, maybe $15 an hour, maybe, some benefits that are stable, maybe some resources like a labor union so they're not exploited and demolished. To the Washington Post, that anger is the same. The anger that I described under President Trump, what's so different about that? And the anger from Bernie Sanders. And we've seen this before from the Washington Post. This from one of their columnists a few months ago. Bernie Sanders has emerged as the Donald Trump on the left. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up, but you don't have to. Because what this is, and I'm not going to name names, but I know people even in my life that are good people. I enjoy spending time with them. My family, people I know that are older than I, and they read the Washington Post and they read the New York Times and they watch MSNBC or CNN, and I love them, good people, but they're just brainwashed with this same rhetoric to say, oh, Bernie's unrealistic, stop the yelling, and frankly, he comes off angry, his tone, and frankly, most of those people don't have a lot of anger themselves economically, because most of those people are the winners in this Hunger Games society. Not that they didn't work hard themselves to get to where they are, but they're not feeling the economic squeeze. They haven't had the money stolen from them, from the elites. So they're feeling quite comfortable. Ironically, most of those people live in coastal cities like New York City, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Los Angeles, a lot of wealthy folk in Chicago. So when the Washington Post does this, and by the way, it's not just the Washington Post. Obviously, we focus on the Washington Post because they do it the most out of anyone. But when the Washington Post does this, what they're trying to do is make economic populism and economic anger, not anger at Mexicans, not anger at Muslims, not anger at immigrants, anger at this. Anger at this. What this is in front of you, folks, is barbarism. Because what's not shown on this chart is all the people in this corporation masquerading as a country that are sleeping on the streets. They're not showing you all the people 21 to even 35 or 40 living with their parents right now. They're not showing you all the people that I've met on the road that could barely even talk when I asked to interview them because they're running to their third or fourth job. They're not showing you the people rationing their insulin, rationing their antidepressants, rationing their medicine, either for life-saving medical illnesses or life-saving mental illnesses. And I got an interview to show you in a little bit with a son, a 29-year-old, who died by killing himself because his health insurance, his for-profit health insurance company, discontinued his medication over a $20 bill. $20 unpaid bill. You're off. We're discontinuing your health care. He didn't know. He went to go fill his health insurance, his medication for his depression and psychosis. Your health insurance kicked you off. Call them. Call. Oh yeah, you didn't pay your $20 bill, so now you gotta wait. He's like, all right, I'll pay it right now. He pays it on the phone. Okay, you'll be effective May 1st. That's in 3 weeks. What am I going to do till then? Sorry. Well, if you have a mental health issue, sometimes it's severe enough that if you're not on medication for even a few days, you start to get down or you start to get up or whatever it is. Depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, you name it. Well, Danny got so down that he glued his seatbelt to himself and he drove into a river. Killed himself. All over $20. And I have an interview with his father in a little bit I'll show, who Kamala Harris exploited the suicide of his son to pretend she is going to provide universal health care, even though she's going to do no such thing. No such thing. And thank you very much. We got $10, Cheryl. $10, Aaron. $20, Sandy Newman. We are now at $68,329. Folks, I might be naive. I believe in miracles, and I believe we could hit $69,000 today. We're an hour and a half into this Marathon Sunday. It's Labor Day weekend. Not a lot of people at the beach, a lot of people at barbecues, a lot of people at the bar, a lot of people all over. Thank you for being with Status Quo, because I'm just getting started, folks. I'm angry. Call it Oligarchy Day, because we, the labor movement in this country, has been decimated by this theft and this racket. And the reason it keeps happening, make no mistake about it, is because places like the Washington Post are gaslighting America in fierce defense of the very people stealing the money right out from under you. And here's the GoFundMe link. If you got a few bucks, drop it in. We got 413 people watching. Let's keep going on that GoFundMe. If you could be so kind. Super chat's fine too, whatever you prefer. So, well, to be honest with you, YouTube, in addition to suppressing my channel, in addition to demonetizing almost every video, they take 30% of the super chat. So we prefer GoFundMe, but not gonna knock it if you knock us for GoFundMe. Where do you get the graphs? I'll put in the description after the video where I got the graphs. Somebody just asked. So I want to read a little bit more of this Washington Post story because it's so ridiculous. But this is what's passing as journalism today. And by the way, just so you know, I would have absolutely no problem, none at all. I'd have no problem at all if the Washington Post just came out and said, listen, we are the paper of the establishment. We believe in centrism or, left of center politics. That's where we stand. We believe corporations are a good thing. We believe in capitalism, and we are not for Bernie Sanders. However, we want to give all sides a voice, but that's where we stand. That's fine. Then you can write as many nasty things you want about Bernie Sanders, as long as everybody who's reading it knows that's what it is. But when the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN are doing, and MSNBC are doing propaganda, well, and pretending to be neutral, then, gullible, susceptible people that are reading and watching think, oh, well, maybe this Bernie Sanders is a little angry. He's too angry. Or maybe these ideas are very radical. They're not. And you know what? The reason the writers at the Washington Post aren't angry economically is because they're doing just fine to write their propaganda. Somebody just asked, what are you doing with the money? Just curious. Good question, Vanya. If you're new to Status Quo, we launched about 15 months ago. I used to be at the Young Turks. At the Young Turks, I had, the Young Turks money to go out and travel, covered the campaign, covered Standing Rock, Flint, a lot of other things. So now we launched a GoFundMe last year to try and raise money to travel in the field. So that's what we've been using the GoFundMe money for, travel money. Travel's not cheap. About an average trip for us to go cover, for example, we've been to Flint many, many times as Status Quo. We've been to Detroit. We've been to Seattle. We've been to Dallas, Chicago, Virginia, Vancouver, Las Vegas, California. We've been all over the map covering these important stories. A lot of that coverage was thanks to this GoFundMe. And we are also growing in other ways. You could also become a Status Quo member, statusquo.com/join. This is how we're growing for the long term. So we're not going to do 25 GoFundMes. We plan on doing this GoFundMe, and we're really, really focusing on growing our membership, because membership is recurring. You become a member for as low as a cup of coffee, a sandwich, a salad. You can become a member at $10 a month. You can become a member at You can become a member at $10 a month. You can become a member at $5 a month. You can become a member at $20 a month or $179 annually. Each level, you get a little bit more bonus content. This is how we're growing for the long term. So we have, last time I checked, 697 Status Quo members. We want to get that up to 1,000 by the end of the year. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. I hope it will happen. But you got to have big goals to make big things happen. And this is, the recurring revenue that we need to not only have the money to travel, but also to have the money to hire more reporters and grow status quo. That's the ultimate goal. And we're transparent. I mean, I'm telling you straight up, what you're seeing in front of you is not like we don't have $68,384 like on hand. Thank you, $40 from Anonymous. Thank you, $5 from Alex, Benjamin, $10. We don't have all of that on hand because we've spent as we've gone. And if we are seeking larger funding, if we get that larger funding, you will know who it's from. We want to be as transparent as possible. Right now, we're seeking funding from progressives who believe in what we're doing, who might do well themselves and want to invest or want to donate or whatever. So we're working on that. We're not looking for money from the big donors to the Democrats or the Republicans. Certainly, we don't want your money from the big banks or the oil companies or the pharmaceutical companies or the real estate developers we're not. If we're going to do this, we're doing it right. And we're not taking shortcuts. That's why we're growing through the ground up. So that's where the money's going. Hope that makes sense to you. So, and I think did I miss any super chats? Excuse me. Thank you, Balthazar, 228. If you had Streamlabs, you could not only get alert for donations, but YouTube wouldn't charge donors extra, and you could take PayPal. It's free, too. Yes, I know. Balthazar, right now, I'm one man down, or one man and one woman. Ty is not with us anymore, which I told you about 2 weeks ago. We're on great terms. He's still living here. He's just going out doing other things. He also didn't have the time we needed. We're looking for someone relatively full time. He had to do some other things as well. So still part of the Status Quo family. He'll be on from time to time. So we are looking for a camera person, editor. That person has to be in New York City or close to New York City. So we've put it on ZipRecruiter, our job description. If you are in New York or New York City, if you have camera experience, editing experience, lighting, audio, graphics, if you got the whole package, feel free to email info@statusquo.com. I definitely want somebody here to work with. This will be my camera person / editor, but also travel with other reporters as we are able to hire new people. So on Streamlabs, we're definitely going to do that. Jen's looking into it, but I'm waiting for some help before we start doing a lot of things. So getting back to this, and keep it coming. I'll try to keep up with the GoFundMe, the super chats. We really, really appreciate the donations. So the reason that I find this so egregious is, the Washington Post, in this propaganda that they continually put out, is trying to make somebody fighting against the gross theft of our money, the gross auction off of our government, as equivalent or somehow, mirroring a fascist bigot. Read this. During a spat between Sanders and Congressman Tim Ryan on the debate stage in July over how to best curb greenhouse gas emissions, Ryan's told a senator from Vermont, "You don't have to yell." Ryan's campaign was quick to use the moment as a marketing ploy with new stickers. "You don't have to yell. Tim Ryan 2020. Yeah, I'm sure that's working out for Tim Ryan, who's still polling, I think, at 0 or 1%. For voters who yearn for the institutional change Sanders shepherded during the 2016 campaign, but are turned off by his tenor, there are now options. Interview with dozens of Democratic voters in Washington, California, New Hampshire, and Nevada showed that many former Sanders loyalists are now playing the field for their 2020 vote. Jonathan Aaron, a 34-year-old software engineer from Seattle who supported Sanders in 2016, felt cheated when the DNC gave the nomination to Clinton. Now Sanders is back on the campaign trail, but Aaron no longer stands behind him. "I just feel that Elizabeth Warren is more of a better understanding of it all," he said of the Massachusetts Democrat, as he perched not far from the stage where Warren would soon address 15,000 rally-goers at a park in Seattle, her biggest event to date. Sanders beat Clinton in the Washington caucus by nearly 50-point margin. The two senators from New England, longtime pals who share a common enemy in Wall Street, find themselves more similar than different when it comes to policy goals such as Medicare for All and student loan debt forgiveness, as well as a message of revolution and structural change. here is more propaganda. What the Washington Post is doing, and CNN has done, and MSNBC has done, and frankly, they're just doing what they did in 2016. Remember the lines where they said, Bernie and Hillary, they're not so far apart. There's not that many differences in policy. Now they're trying to do that. Bernie and Elizabeth, two pals from New England, share a common enemy in Wall Street, find themselves more similar than different when it comes to policy goals. No, there is a difference. There is a difference. If asked, and if I got in front of Elizabeth Warren, I certainly would ask, if asked, are you willing to compromise on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All healthcare plan? If she's being honest, I think she would say yes. If you ask Bernie Sanders, he would say no. Now, if Bernie Sanders were to be elected president, let's be real. Politics is politics. From time to time, Bernie Sanders might have to compromise. But that doesn't mean Bernie Sanders, right after getting elected, right out of the gate, is going to compromise his core convictions. That's why people like Bernie Sanders, because they know he will fight to the deaths politically for what he is proposing. On Elizabeth Warren, people do not know that. Progressives do not know that, because she has shown to be a political calculator. She has been someone that is frankly willing to play with the establishment. The New York Times, the New York Times story just recently reported she's basically been hobnobbing and having hot tea with leaders of the Democratic establishment. I don't think she's telling them, fuck off, you're going to have to eat your broccoli. Oh, just demonetized. Swear jar. I don't think she's sitting there saying, fuck off. We're going to burn down the house and either get out now or you'll be a dead corpse politically. I don't think so. So when they try to make it seem that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they're just very differently. They're just very similar. Their plans are similar. They come from the same school, yada, yada, yada. Well, Bernie Sanders is talking about canceling all student loan debt. I think Elizabeth Warren's plan goes up to $50,000. Bernie Sanders, his Green New Deal plan is $16 trillion. I think Elizabeth Warren's is about $2 trillion. Bernie Sanders, he don't waver on Medicare for all. Elizabeth Warren is for Medicare for all, depending on the day. Some interviews, during the town hall with CNN, she said, let's just get everybody to the table, and there's a lot of different pathways to get there, and yada, yada, yada. No, there's not a lot of different pathways to get there. This is what politicians who are just going with the wind, going with the political wind, that's what politicians going with the political wind say. And excuse me while I Marco Rubio for a second. So, Bernie Sanders is not like Elizabeth Warren. Frankly, if we're being real, I don't trust that Elizabeth Warren's going to fight for the things she says. Secondly, listen, I'm not going to knock people that voted for Bernie and now are moving over to Warren. I tell my viewers, vote for whoever you want. If they want to move away from Bernie to Warren, I think they're being naive, but that's for them to decide. However, it's coincidental that the Washington Post just finds some people that used to like Bernie, now like Warren, to say, she just has a better grasp of things than Bernie. What's the evidence for that? None. Quote, it's not as though Warren is content to thunder against the evildoers like an Old Testament prophet. There's much more, that's much more his said William Galston, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and former domestic policy advisor to President Bill Clinton. Sanders sees his campaign as a revolutionary mass movement to upset the established order. While Senator Warren is obviously very dissatisfied with the status quo, she describes her campaign in a very different terms, and terms that I think are less scary. Less scary. Well, essentially what I'm hearing from these former Bernie Sanders supporters that are now Elizabeth Warren supporters at the Washington Post, because what the Washington Post is really trying to do is brainwash people to think, Elizabeth Warren is Bernie Sanders. She just is more palatable. She's less angry. And what the Washington Post is basically trying to say is the problem with Bernie And the way Bernie could succeed, it's not that his policies are wrong. It's just that, he should say it more nicely. He should say it more concretely. Instead of yelling against us and being mean about it, he should say, he should be more like Elizabeth Warren and say, gee, gosh, top 1%, do you mind just stop robbing us? I don't mean to be rude. I'm a capitalist down to my bones, but do you mind, we'll just regulate you a little more and regulation will get us to the promised land. But, I don't want to burn down the system, and I'm a capitalist to my bones. This is what the Washington Post is trying to brainwash people into thinking, that basically Elizabeth Warren, why she's so great, and if by the way, I didn't show you this yet, but here's just the latest propaganda. This from yesterday, 2 days ago. Why Elizabeth Warren is the one to watch, from the Washington Post. Finding a Republican of all people to say Elizabeth Warren is the one to watch. So on this, it's not just, the Washington Post isn't just finding Democrats to prop up Elizabeth Warren. They're finding Republicans. And this is systematic, folks. This is totally systematic. I showed you this on Friday, but if you didn't see it, look at CNN's fuckery. Here we go.
And a large lead for all of the Democratic frontrunners there. Tell us what this news means for the president. How seriously are they taking these numbers?
I mean, what Harry was pointing to with the economy, I think that, that number is problematic for sure for the president, because this is the...
Did you see something wrong with that? Anything wrong with that graphic? Do I need to show you again? All right, one more time.
And a large lead for all of the Democratic frontrunners there. Tell us what this news means for the president. How seriously are they taking these numbers?
I mean, what Harry was pointing to with the economy, I think that, that number is problematic for sure for the president, because this is the...
Apparently, the Washington Post wants you to think Bernie Sanders is the equivalent to Donald Trump. The Washington Post wants you to think, by the way, we are now at $68,399, $600 from $69,000. Oh my God. I'm going to a Labor Day housewarming party later. I will be in such euphoria if we could reach $69,000 for this Labor Day party that I'm going to later. And by the way, I'm going to tell everyone at the party, there's nothing to celebrate here, folks. This is not Labor Day. This is Oligarchy Day, as I've told you since the beginning of this live stream. Can we get $600 in a few hours? I think so. It's going to take a village. We got 400-something people watching. Keep it coming. GoFundMe. I'll put the link right there in the super chat. So, CNN and MSNBC has been caught doing this too, is literally just making up numbers. In mathematics, in that graphic, Bernie Sanders is 14 points above beating Donald Trump in the latest polls. Elizabeth Warren is at 12 points. So Bernie's beating him by 14, Elizabeth Warren beating him by 12. It's not bad. Elizabeth Warren beating him by 12 is impressive too. But CNN somehow swapped those two things, where Bernie by 14 is shown below Elizabeth Warren by 12. I don't want to take credit. Thank you, Henry. I gave $5 and I'm dead broke. That's all I could ask. Thank you so much. I don't want to take credit, but I tweeted that out and called out CNN for their fuckery. And then, coincidentally, just an hour later.
These are some really interesting numbers, because part of Joe Biden's strength has been this case that he's making to Democratic primary voters that he's the most electable. But take a look at these head-to-head matchups in this Quinnipiac poll. Almost every single one of the Democratic frontrunners are beating Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup. Biden with a big lead. Bernie Sanders, 53 to 39% over President Trump, as is Elizabeth Warren, as is Kamala Harris, as is Pete Buttigieg. So Democrats right now believe that they've got a strong case that if any of these...
So apparently CNN learned mathematics in the span of 2 hours. And, some people on Twitter were saying, oh, Jordan, sometimes graphics people or the producers get graphics wrong. No. This has happened several times on CNN, on MSNBC. I saw one instance on MSNBC where they literally said, oh, Elizabeth Warren has taken the lead over Bernie Sanders in a New Hampshire poll, when the poll on screen showed they were tied. But this all goes back to what I have been talking about on this Oligarchy Day. Again, Oligarchy Day. And excuse me, but I'm going to stand. I'm going to stand for a little bit. Let's see how the camera angle is with me standing. Am I okay on the camera? Yeah. You know, having back problems, you got to stand instead of sitting sometimes. So what is remarkable about this is day to day just lying to the viewers who are then the voters, and they get away with this. And this is what brings me to the whopper of all whoppers, where the Washington Post has the audacity to fact check Bernie Sanders as 3 Pinocchios for saying 530,000 families, or 500,000 families, I think it was, declare bankruptcy every year because of medical bills. I'm sure you've heard about this. I haven't discussed it yet. Here's Libby Watson from Splinter describing what happened. Washington Post dives to new low to attack Bernie. It's the first day of July, so summer is here and the rent is due. Oh, excuse me, that's not the one I want. Hold on. This is from Rolling Stone. Oh, darn it. I didn't get it. Hold on. We're live. Rolling Stone. Washington Post. Fact check. All right, here we go. So I thought this piece was great. As you know, the Washington Post gave Bernie Sanders 3 Pinocchios that he said over 500,000 people declare, or families declare bankruptcy due to medical debt. Bernie Sanders' campaign has called for the Washington Post to retract that. Let's take a look. Medical debt is a major driver of personal bankruptcy. This is a fact that Bernie Sanders highlights on the stump in support of his Medicare for All proposal. Sanders, who is more fond of the statistic than stories, drives home the point with a big number. 500,000 people go bankrupt every year because they cannot pay their outrageous medical bills, he said on TV recently. The Washington Post has a political fact-checking department, and the aim is admirable, to hold candidates accountable and call them out when they're playing fast and loose with the truth. But as the Post's recent check of Sanders' medical bankruptcy stat underscores, the paper's pursuit of facts can at times go off the rails. I think this is a bit generous to the Post. I wouldn't give them, it's virtuous what they try to do. The Washington Post is a propaganda mill. Let's call it what it is. The Post piece gave Sanders 3 Pinocchios for the claim on medical debt, which is the paper's shorthand for mostly false. To have earned 3 Pinocchios, we assume Bernie's claim is a real doozy, one wooden puppet short of a whopper. So what's the matter with the statistic? As it turns out, nothing much at all. Sanders' team told the Post that the Vermont senator was relying on an estimate published in a medical journal that found that 66.5% of bankruptcy filers cited either medical bills or missed work due to illness as a reason they went broke. The journal itself said this was the equivalent to about 530,000 medical bankruptcies annually. At first glance, it appears Bernie understated the problem by rounding down. The checker did an admirable thing and reached out to the author of the study, Dr. David Himmelstein, a professor of public health in the CUNY system and a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. When we asked Himmelstein whether Sanders was quoting his study accurately, the fact-check reporter said he said yes. So I don't need to read any more of this. You get the point. So what's even more remarkable about this is from the Washington Post in February of this year. A new study has found medical problems contribute to 66.5% of all bankruptcies, a rate that has mostly remained the same since before the ACA passed. The study, published in the American Journal of Public Health, found before the ACA went into effect, 65.5% of people in debt cited medical concerns contributing to bankruptcy, compared with 67.5% in the 3 years after the healthcare law was implemented. It found 530,000 families deal with bankruptcies related to illness on medical bills. Excuse me. What is this the Washington Post says? It found 530,000 families deal with bankruptcies related to medical bills? But I thought that was 3 Pinocchios. And then you have the Washington Post twisting itself into a human pretzel. This is from Glenn Kessler, who is the fact checker, who said, because Warren Gunnels, who's the senior advisor to Bernie Sanders, called out the Washington Post for saying Bernie Sanders' claim of medical bankruptcies wasn't peer-reviewed. So Glenn, the fact checker who gave Bernie 3 Pinocchios, this is false. Article did not say it was not peer-reviewed. We quote an editor saying the editorial did not undergo the same peer-reviewed editing process as a research article, but note it used a methodology similar to what the researchers used in 2005. Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone called out this buffoonery, propaganda, and fuckery. Quote, "We didn't say the article wasn't peer-reviewed. We just said it didn't undergo the same peer-reviewed editing process as a research article, despite using a methodology similar to another peer-reviewed study. Has to go in the doublespeak Hall of Fame." I mean, folks, I don't know how much more clear it has to be made. These people are propaganda merchants. This kind of propaganda is not much different than the propaganda you see out of other countries. State-run media. The Washington Post, in its own paper, cites the same exact number that Bernie Sanders put out. So the Washington Post, day to day, I've already shown you their go-to now. They got 3 things going, all in the span of a week, all in the span of a few months. Try to equate Bernie Sanders with Trump. Try to compare the anger of Bernie Sanders supporters economically, which I would call justified anger, justified hurting, and also passion, with the anger of Islamophobes, anti-immigration folks, flat earthers, trickle-downers, all these people that love Trump. Try to compare that anger with that anger. They're also trying to prop up Elizabeth Warren, and they're also basically calling themselves liars. They put out that same statistic. And if you look at, let me get it up here. If you look at the Twitter of Bernie Sanders' senior advisor, Warren Gunnels, who demanded a retraction from the Washington Post for this false claim. Take a look. The Washington Post refused to retract its fact-checking, accusing Bernie of lying by saying 500,000 Americans will go bankrupt this year for medical bills. The author of the study that Bernie Sanders was citing said even the 530,000 figure is an underestimate of the number of people affected by medical bankruptcies. Sad. And he puts right here the Washington Post response to the Sanders campaign request for a retraction. The campaign of Vermont Bernie Sanders has asked for a retraction on a recent fact-checker column that awarded the Democratic presidential candidate 3 Pinocchios. The campaign raised 2 points of contention, neither of which holds up. The fact checks cities. The fact check cites 2 instances in which Sanders states the medical bills cause 500,000 bankruptcies a year. To back that claim, the campaign cited a March 2019 editorial published in the American Journal of Public Health. That study did not seek to determine what causes bankruptcies, only factors that contribute to them. On this basis alone, the statements by Senator Sanders are misleading. The study found that 44% of respondents said they very much agree that the medical expenses or loss of work related to illnesses contributed to their bankruptcies. Another 22% said they somewhat agreed. By combining both groups, the study estimates that medical-related issues were a contributing factor in around 530,000 bankruptcies per year. Senator Sanders overstates that finding in his statements, which identify medical debt as the sole reason. You have got to be fucking kidding me with this bullshit. You got to be kidding. I mean, the dishonesty, and really what they're trying to do is pick at semantics. But guess what? The very polling that the Washington Post does, because like many other outlets, there's polls on the presidential elections, there's polls on issues that the Washington Post authors or partners with, the very polls that the Washington Post do themselves exercise in the same exact thing that Bernie Sanders was referencing. Thank you, Status Quo. Keep doing what you're doing. We're trying. And just to give you an update, because I've been giving you GoFundMe updates, I also want to give you updates when we get a new Status Quo member. So we just got a new member. Let me take a look here. Welcome to the Media Revolution. Colleen, new Status Quo member. Barbara, new Status Quo member. So we're now at 697 Status Quo members. Maybe we can get a couple more while I'm live. Our goal is to get to 1,000 by the end of this year. So we got September, October, November, December. That's 4 months. We got to get to 1,000 paid members. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. That is what's going to get us out in the field for the long term. I don't want to just babble to you, even though I'm presenting facts. I don't want to just babble to you, and none of us want to just be talking from our homes. We want to get out into the trenches. That's where we do our core work, and we thank you. Also, oh wow, we just got a bigger donation. Thank you, Samantha, $50 in the GoFundMe. We're now at $68,449, just $550 away from $69,000. Thank you, Samantha. You've donated several times. We really appreciate it. Can I get $550 before we end this live stream today? I hope so. I think it's possible. So, the last thing I'm going to say on this, the Washington Post wants to make Bernie Sanders and his supporters look like, a bunch of angry, radical leftists. They want to make the voters that tend to vote the most, older people, establishment people, they want to make those voters uneasy. They want to make those voters think there's something dangerous about Bernie Sanders and his supporters. And they also want to make it seem that his claims are not backed up by facts. And not only is he angry, not only is he radical, but he's also a liar. This is part of corporate propaganda that exploits workers. This is the things. Thank you, Kip Winner, $10 in the super chat. Jordan, BYB. I don't know what BYB stands for, but okay. Thanks for the BYB. This is part of the corporate propaganda that keeps this barbarism growing. This is part of the corporate barbarism and propaganda and theft of your money that keeps the money trickling in to the very owner of companies like the Washington Post. That would be Jeff Bezos and Amazon, who own the Washington Post. And if you need any more, folks, the original study I showed you at the beginning of this live stream, exorbitant, that found that CEO pay has gone up 940%. 940% since 1978. Why does it matter? CEO pay is a major contributor to rising inequality that we could safely do away with. CEOs are getting more because of their power to set pay, not because they are increasing productivity or processes or possess specific high-demand skills. This escalation of CEO compensation and of executive compensation more generally has fueled the growth of top 1% and top 0.1% incomes, leaving less of the fruits of economic growth for ordinary workers. I think this is a good segue to my interview with Scott Desnoyers, because one of the sectors and industry that are part of this corporate theft is actually killing people, and that would be the pharmaceutical industry. For those of you that don't know, we basically have a Hunger Games for-profit healthcare system in this country that basically kicks either physically or mentally ill people off it, even if they don't pay $20. But if you watch Joe Biden's ad, his healthcare ad, which frankly, a lot of people think exploited the death of his wife, daughter, and son, he says people have a right for affordable healthcare. No, we need to get affordable and healthcare out of our jargon and sentences. It shouldn't cost money to live. It's on you whether you work hard. It's on you whether you do the right things to get ahead. It's not on you to work hard so you can afford to live and be healthy. You have the choice what you eat. In some cases you don't, if you're a low-income, poor black person. You only make enough, so you go to McDonald's or whatever's quickest and cheapest. But we should not live in an economy, and this is the economy Joe Biden wants to keep us in. This is the economy that Kamala Harris would keep us in, Pete Buttigieg would keep us in. Frankly, depending on the day, Elizabeth Warren would keep us in, where whether you live or die is based on whether you have money in your pocket. Here is my interview with Scott Desnoyers. This is the second interview I've had with him. This is an update because he has some sharp words for Senator Kamala Harris, who exploited the suicide of his son, Scott, for her political gain. If you like what you're seeing, become a Status Coup member during the interview. That's statuscoup.com/join. And please, we're trying to grow. Keep it coming if you can. We are now just $550 away from 69,000, which I would like to reach today. Here's my interview with Scott. Hey, it's Jordan. I am with Scott Desnoyers. I interviewed Scott a couple weeks ago about a really tragic topic. For those of you that didn't see that interview, just to remind you of Scott's really terrible situation. He has, I think you have two kids, correct?
Actually, I've got a total of 4.
Okay, so 4 kids.
Danny was the oldest. He's got a sister Tabby, a sister Joanna, and a brother Aiden.
Okay. So instead of me describing it, sorry to ask you again, if you don't mind describing again what happened before we get to the latest developments.
Sure. Back in March, beginning of March, my oldest son Danny moved back in with me. He had some problems with his girlfriend, which they shared a child with. And he needed some help because he had lost his job, and there was also an order of protection against him, so he couldn't go back to the house. 2 or 3 weeks after he had moved in with me, he had run out of his depression medication and went to get it refilled. When he went to get it refilled, he was told that his insurance had been canceled and it would cost him $250 out of pocket to pay for it. He came running home, he was all upset. He's like, "Pops, I know I need this medicine." I was like, "Relax, we'll figure out what's going on. Call your insurance company, we'll find out what's going on." He missed a $20 new payment that he wasn't aware of. I'm sure that at one point he must have been made aware when he signed up, but in the chaos of his life and with depression and everything else going on, he must have forgotten about it. We told him we'd get him help. We were going to do everything we could to try to come up with the money for the medication. We didn't have it in our pockets at the time. For the record, the insurance company was Fidelis Care, and the medication was 3 milligrams of heroin. When he called up Fidelis, he said they told him he'd missed a $20 payment. He made the payment on the phone that day. And they told him his medication would be, or his services would be reinstated as of May 1st, because this was after April 1st that he had called. This is common practice for insurance companies. You don't get reinstated right away. You're made to wait for the next payment, which is the beginning of the next month. And they only do this, mind you, so that they can save paying treatment for that period of time, to save money. So they got their payment. 2 weeks after this happened, I see a post on his Facebook where I'm looking at the water from the cab of his truck, and it was something to the effect of, I super glued my seatbelt shut. I double checked. I'm not strong enough to get it free. I've decided this life isn't for me. Maybe the next one will be better. Some people might say this is selfish. I'm so sorry, Daniel and Hazel. It was something to that effect. It was his goodbye letter. I saw it a couple of seconds after he posted it. I live about 7 minutes from Saratoga Lake, so I rushed into my car trying to find, hoping I could go save him, not knowing he was at the river. I started fighting the Medicare for All because I realized that had we had that, he would have had his medicine. This wouldn't have happened. It's ridiculous that in the richest nation in the world, we can't figure out how to pay for health care for everyone when every other country can.
And he had depression with some psychotic features?
Yes. I think a mild psychosis he was diagnosed with, along with depression, and I think there was one other diagnosis along with it. And risperidone is an antipsychotic. Now, again, I have to tell you, when he came in the door, he said, word for word, "Pops, I know I need this medicine." Before all of this happened, everybody, he'd gotten 4 jobs within the 1 month he lived with me. Who the hell does that that's trying to give up on life? You know, he was fighting for his kids because that's what he was all about, is being a dad. And he knew he needed a job to see his children. He knew he needed resources. He was fighting. Everybody that he worked with said they couldn't believe the change they had saw and how happy he was. He was happy 2 weeks before he did this. He lost his medicine. The chemical imbalance. If you read any medical journal, chemical imbalance happens about 2 weeks, and that's when your suicidal thoughts happen. Fidelis knew he was on antipsychotics because they were paying for it. They knew if you take somebody off within a couple of weeks, you can end up having psychotic thoughts. It didn't matter to these mobster-type mentalities. They said, pay me or too bad you're on your own. They don't care about the consequences. This isn't just about Fidelis, mind you, because had he been on any other insurance company plan, he missed his payment, the same outcome would have happened. Which brings me to my next point. When you and I had this conversation before, we had discussed that I was after the for-profit insurance industry, not just Fidelis. I am for Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, not some cheap knockoff that sells our children to the for-profit industry like Kamala Harris has suggested I was for, maybe.
So I want to bring that.
I want
to bring that to the audience. So basically, you've been, somewhat successful. You had Congressman Ro Khanna speak about Danny's suicide on the congressional floor. I believe Tulsi Gabbard might have mentioned it, and I believe you've had several people. Now This News did a video with you.
I've reached out to Tulsi, but to my knowledge, she hasn't responded.
Okay.
However, I have heard from Representative Jayapal. I've heard from Senator Nina Turner several times. Mm-hmm. I've heard from, I spoke to my local representative, Representative Tonko here in Albany. He was very proud of his work that he did on the ACA, as well he should be. He got a lot of stuff accomplished with that we really needed at the time. The ACA is no longer working for us, however, and he needs to understand that we need to move towards a better system. And he sat and listened to me. I've also heard from Ellen Omar. You know, she's also helped. Susan Sarandon just yesterday retweeted Danny's story.
Mm-hmm. So I want my audience to see what Kamala Harris tweeted out. This was in June. Quoting you, my son is gone. That's my fire. I don't have anything left of him, but this fight is for him. She had put in that tweet the Now This video with you and highlights of Ro Khanna's floor speech. And then she said, no one should get cut from insurance because they're $20 short. The cost of health care is drowning far too many Americans. It's time we passed Medicare for all. What's interesting about this is the time period, this was in June, before, when she was basically running on Bernie Sanders' health care plan. And then I believe around the same time as the second debate, she started talking about that she is not comfortable with Bernie Sanders' health care plan, the Medicare for All plan, in its current form. And according to the New York Times,
heard though within like 30 minutes, and then she raised her hand on the stage saying that she was for killing all the for-profit insurance industries. And then right after the debate, when questioned, I misunderstood.
Right.
I believe that's the way that went down.
She's a charitable version would be she's done some moonwalking, kind of faster than Michael Jackson. But I just want to read the New York Times description of her health care plan, the new one, which she is calling Medicare for All. Instead of completely replacing private coverage with a government-run single-payer system based on traditional Medicare, Ms. Harris would allow people to choose plans modeled on Medicare Advantage, which would be run not by the government but by private insurers. More than one-third of the Medicare population already chooses Medicare Advantage, which offers extra benefits and limits out-of-pocket costs, but is strict about which doctors and hospitals enrollees can use. So basically, in my view, and I'd like to know what you think, you can't call something Medicare if it's not run by the government. It's run by private insurers. First, I want to ask, what did it say to you when she had first originally tweeted out your son's story before she changed? What did it say to you, and how did you feel when you saw she had moonwalked away from that and used your son's story before doing so?
William, first off, I want to thank you for this opportunity because I want to be crystal clear. I personally tweeted Kamala Harris myself, asking for her support for Medicare for All. She was a co-sponsor of Bernie Sanders' plan. When I first started into this activation, again, I was politically asleep for a while. So I had looked up Bernie Sanders' bill and read who the co-sponsors were, and I had asked every one of the co-sponsors to please support it. I was surprised when Kamala was one of the ones that did. Thus, I had assumed she didn't have a health care plan of her own and was still supporting Bernie Sanders' plan of Medicare for All and going with his plan instead of coming up with her own. I was happy about that. I thanked her for that. It was about 2 to 3 weeks later that she released her plan. I'm sure somebody could easily figure out the exact math, but it wasn't very long after. I do not for 1 second believe, and I don't believe anybody other than maybe a Kamala supporter might, that she did not know she had this plan coming. This was months in the planning that she sat down with people and said, this is how we're going to go forward with my Medicare for All plan. She's already received, I'm sure, plenty of donations, and again, I haven't researched that. I'm sure there's been donations to her campaign from people, the lobbyists that are supporting her Medicare for All plan versus Bernie Sanders that would destroy their corporation.
Well, not to interrupt you, but I have researched it. That's my job. Kamala Harris, other than Joe Biden, has taken more money from Wall Street bankers, big corporations, definitely healthcare money, and all of these outfits are certainly invested in the for-profit healthcare system.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my suspicion as well. Joe Biden is another one I'm really upset with now with the release of his latest ad. I'm not sure if you saw that one,
I did.
where he's trying to say we're insulting his dead son along that lines by going against the Obamacare that he stood for. Now, mind you, Obamacare did not pay for this care that his son did receive. His son received the best care. And I'm not faulting Joe Biden for that. If I could give Danny the best care, I would have. Who wouldn't? However, his son didn't get the best care by Obamacare. His care was paid for out of pocket by President Obama himself.
Well,
it wasn't even the Obamacare that paid for his son's.
Actually,
he got better treatment than that.
Actually, interestingly enough, because I just did a video on this yesterday, according to the Washington Post, the Biden family did not take President Obama up on that offer. I don't know where they got that, but this is what they're reporting. So I looked into it. Beau Biden, who again, I mean, I don't blame Joe Biden for wanting to move heaven and earth to give his son, who had terminal brain cancer. Beau Biden, his term ended at the beginning of January 2015 as Delaware Attorney General. Immediately after that, he got a job at a major law firm that had donated and bundled money for President Obama and Joe Biden, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was in January 2015. He passed in May 2015. So presumably, the company that he was working for, he got that health insurance from that company. He also, I can't confirm this, was a veteran, so he might have gotten some benefits from the VA. But the point of that ad, which is kind of dishonest, is Joe Biden had said, "I can't imagine what we would have done if the health insurance company would have denied Beau." But the point is, he didn't have to imagine because he's a well-connected person. He was the vice president. And most people, either if they have an illness or if they get fired or whatever the case may be, that they leave their job, don't get a new job the next day at a prestigious law firm that donated a lot of money to their father. So that's why he didn't have to imagine. So we don't. My point of saying that is he was putting out there almost like under the guise that it was the Obamacare health plan that gave his son treatment, which was not the case. It was that his son got employer health care right after he left Attorney General of Delaware.
And it's personally offensive to me because the ACA is the same system that Danny was on. The ACA is designed where these slips, cracks in the system, people are going to slip through. 30 to 45,000 Americans per year die because of lack of insurance or not enough insurance. Danny was one of those 30 to 45,000. He is saying it's bad to allow these people to continue to die to make sure that those that are still taken care of survive. His comfort level depends upon these lives being lost to the insurance companies to continue to prosper. I know that's a long way to look at it, but not if it's your child that has been lost. Because it's the downright truth.
I think that another concerning thing is under Joe Biden's plan, under Kamala Harris's plan, unfortunately, it's very possible the same thing would have happened with your son, because if the for-profit healthcare industry is still in the driver's seat, Joe Biden says there's going to be a public option, but if you do enough homework on public options, it's not universal. It doesn't mean every single person would have access to that government option. So bottom line, Joe Biden's expanded Obamacare can still have companies like Fidelis saying, "Oh, well, you called too late, so you'll get, you have to wait a month till you're reapplied." Well, you and I spoke about this in our first interview. Imagine a senior citizen who is old and needs oxygen. Well, you don't have to imagine that person, missing a payment and as such having to wait a month for oxygen because they have Medicare. And that wouldn't happen. So it's the same exact thing with mental health. There's unfortunately still a stigma with mental health. I've been clear. I take antidepressants. I've had bouts with depression, suicidal thoughts. For me, if the same thing happened and I was without my antidepressants for 2-3 weeks, I don't know how I would react. I really don't. I've been on antidepressants for a year, and knock on wood, I haven't had, I have normal up and downs, but nothing like Danny had. So
Danny was stable during his medicated time. People saw that he was happy, and even though he was fighting for visitation of two different court cases at the same time, he was still moving forward. And this is visible through documents, the fact that he's got work, achieve employment. The fact that he was getting a truck, got his phone turned back on. He was doing progressive actions that a person does to get things made right. And then when his medication got cut off, he was no longer stable. And the chemical imbalance, I truly believe, had a major part in where he ended up. I believe if he had his medication, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I'd be bored out of my skull today.
Right. I also want to ask you, because Kamala Harris, frankly, in interviews since she released this new plan, hasn't really been clear. Even CNN, who's not known for pushing back on power, said, well, how are you going to provide this without raising taxes at all? And she really didn't answer. She just said the current system's not stable. So I wanted to ask you, if you were in front of Kamala Harris with that badass red beret, what exactly would you ask her? What would you say to her, and what would you want to know about her plan?
Well, no matter what, if you recall, Jordan, one of my promises is to be on the Senate floor and look at our state lawmakers, or our lawmakers, in the eye and show them what they've done to me. This is, again, just not me, but there's going to be other families that are affected, other lives just like mine. But they're going to look at me in the eye and see the consequences of their decision. If Kamala's lucky, she'll still be a senator at that time. She better be on that floor, because I do plan on looking at her directly. She knows what she did was a bait and switch. One second, my dog. Sorry, Loki. Not right now. Go lay down. Yeah, Loki's missing my attention.
That's okay.
But no, you're right. I want to explain to Kamala, first off, the 10-year plan is ridiculous. That's saying she's going to keep a Democratic House, Senate, and presidency, her term, the second term, and the third term, to make sure that happens, as if Obamacare didn't get ripped apart in two. The fact that, as you mentioned earlier, that these insurance companies are still going to be in the driver's seat. So are their lobbyists, which are paying the campaigns to keep their laws in place. You're right. There's still going to be people killed on purpose because they want their money. These insurance companies don't care about people, they care about money. That's why their board members are there, that's why their CEOs are there, not for people. They're for money. So if I were to see Kamala face to face, I wouldn't even go around, I'd go straight for the jugular, and I want her to explain to me why she thought it was presidential of her to use a father's grief, anger, and pain of his son's suicide to promote his son's murderers. That's what I'd ask her. Why that's acceptable. Is it that important that you receive the presidency that this is acceptable behavior? That's what I'd ask her.
And I'd like to ask you also, obviously, as far as I don't know if Elizabeth Warren has referenced your son's tragedy, but there's been concern among the progressive community that although she, during debates, raised her hand and I'm with Bernie and all this, in other instances, she has kind of sounded a little bit more vague. I recall at a CNN town hall, she talked about let's get everybody to the table and we'll figure it out, rather than, Bernie's Medicare for all and that's it. What are your thoughts on Elizabeth Warren? Because the media, frankly, has really been showering her with some positive coverage. Are you feeling confident, if she were to get a nomination or presidency, that she will follow through on full-scale Medicare for all?
All right. At this time, I will say that right now, if you do not support Medicare for all 100%, and I'm talking either Bernie Sanders' bill or Jayapal's bill, Representative Jayapal's bill, I now have to make that clear. I didn't think I would have to make that clear in the beginning when I said I was for Bernie Sanders' bill. But yeah, either Representative Jay Appel's or Bernie Sanders' bill are the only two that I support. If the candidate does not show me 100% that they are behind one of these bills, they don't have my vote. I won't vote for Trump, obviously. I will vote for somebody who I believe represents me and my family. If they don't represent me and my family, if they represent a for-profit insurance healthcare industry that is responsible for killing my son, why would I give you my vote? You're throwing your support behind my son's murderers and asking me to vote for you so you can do that? No. So if Elizabeth Warren cannot show me 100% that she is truly 100% real Medicare for all in a single payer system, such as Bernie Sanders or Representative Jay Appel's, and she has not convinced me yet. I believe if she was really serious, she would have thrown her support behind Bernie back in 2015. Not 2016, 2015, she should have thrown her support behind him. If she truly believed that we need Medicare for all and she was going to stand behind it.
And last question, and I put a disclaimer that I'm sorry to have to ask you because I don't want to make you more down. I think the audience needs to know the really raw after effect of something like this. Your son was only 29. He had 2 children. Obviously, he leaves you, your wife, your other kids. How are Danny's 2 kids doing? And what's you and your wife's days like? I mean, whatever you're comfortable sharing, but I see you on Twitter. I see you on Twitter, and I feel your pain, but we can't. Twitter is Twitter. I'd like to know, what is it like dealing with this?
As far as his children, I don't want to get into it too much. There's still a lot of issues between the baby's moms and us.
Okay.
So things don't go well there. We wish they went a lot better than they are. For us, life sucks. Every day. Every single day, I cry. Not that masculine, but you know what? Also, every single day, I'm out here fighting for it. I don't know how any single parent loses his child without the international support and love that I've received. It's amazing that so many people have reached out to me without that support. I don't know how I could make it. I don't know how they make it. I don't know what else to do other than fight. Danny gave me this fight. I keep saying that. I don't mean to sound like Bernie's always repeating myself, but this is what Danny gave me. I'm working, we mentioned my rally that I want to have. That's coming together a lot closer. We have no date yet, but we are going after the mass media. I don't want to give any more than that because I don't want a lot of information where they're expecting my attack. But it will be an attack on the mass media because I've asked them to share Danny's story. Thousands of parents have asked to share their stories.
To be clear, because I don't want your words to be misconstrued, you're talking about a political attack, not a physical attack on the mass media.
You're absolutely right, a political attack.
Yes.
And thousands of parents have asked to hear their children's stories. We see it on the mass media all the time, our social media, or not the mass media, we see it on our social media all the time. Our Twitter feeds, our Facebook feeds, our Pinterest, all of them are filled with these horrid stories of how our system has failed these people. You know, people under 20 years old dying because they're rationing insulin. Why are we rationing insulin when it only costs $36 a vial in Canada? You know, why are these stories not being told in the news? CNN should be screaming, we should be in our yellow vest. France has made us look ridiculous as patriots. They truly have. We need to be doing what these other countries are doing when their governments are corrupt. But we're complacent. No more for me. I'm going out there and I'm doing something. But yeah, there's going to be a big event that I'm working on. I've got Amy Viella still involved. I've got a couple of other people that I don't want to get too many names again. I don't have a lot of details, but if people follow me on Twitter, I'm going to be sure to make enough noise so that everybody gets involved with me.
Great. I appreciate you keeping me in the loop. I think it's outrageous that you haven't been on CNN yet, or MSNBC, or as far as I know, the New York Times, Washington Post, because honestly, I know why you're not. It's not in their corporate interest, but I think it's a massive story when somebody with mental health issues.
I'll tell you,
Go ahead.
Soledad Brian retweeted Danny's story, the Now This video, and told me about how horrible it was, making me aware that she watched the video.
Who's that? Who retweeted it?
Soledad O'Brien.
Oh, okay.
Joyanne Reed. She had made a tweet a while back and about something, and I said, well, is this important? And I posted my video. And she replied, it doesn't say that she watched the video, but you wouldn't want to respond to something that big if you don't research it as a journalist would. I could be wrong, but I highly doubt she didn't watch the video before responding to it. Furthermore, she asked me not to use her name, so I'll give her that. But there was a CNN reporter that was in communication with me on 2 different occasions. It was on the phone and through Facebook messaging. We had had several communications back and forth on those 2 different occasions. It was separated by like 2 weeks. After that 2 weeks with the communication just died, she said she had gotten laid off and her entire crew from CNN. She'd said also several times in our communications that she had to run it by her producer, which means that CNN has been advised. Now, she could say what she wants, that that doesn't mean that because she was reporting to her producer that they are. That sounds kind of silly to me.
Well, I could say this. I think that obviously one person's story can make a big difference. And I also think that it is not in their interest to showcase that story, because if you look at their commercials, it is littered with pharmaceutical advertisements amongst big oil and big banks. So it's not in their interest to highlight the obvious barbarism of this system.
And that's what Bernie was saying during the debate. He told them during the debate, called them right out. He said there would be pharmaceutical companies advertising against his Medicare for All plan right then and there. And what do you know? I'm pretty sure it was the next commercial break, wasn't it, that there was?
Right.
But, yeah, that's my point, is that CNN doesn't want to give the news to the people. I think I'm going to bring the news to them.
I like that. I might steal that for status quo. I want to thank you for taking the time, obviously keeping me in the loop what's going on. We've talked off air. And, stay in touch. I'd like to cover this as much as possible. And I know that this is not, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But I'm glad that you have enough people helping galvanize you to take action out of this. I know that would be difficult for most people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordan. I mean, you've been a huge help along the whole way, and I think I've told you a million times how much I appreciate everything you've done for me and everything you do for everybody with all of your real journalism and not this crap bullshit that we see along the mainstream media. It's people like you that are really making the difference. It's people like, Sean Morrow from Now This that got my story out there. These are the anti-corporate people that we need out there, because you're accepting donations from the little guy, not big pharmaceutical, and therefore you're speaking up, much like Bernie, for his donors. You're speaking up for your donors. That's us.
And I'm going to go a little longer because I want to make a point. So it's interesting you said that. I didn't get an offer from a pharmaceutical person, but I did get an offer a few months ago. I'm not going to say who out of respect, but I got an offer from someone for a sizable amount of money that frankly would have been what I need to make status quo explode. It was a fairly wealthy man. He's given to both the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. He talked the talk, liked what we were doing, blah, blah, blah. However, he wouldn't sign on the bottom line that he would have no editorial control of the company. And I also was not convinced that we shared the same values. Not to say he's a terrible person, but I don't think I could have had the street cred if I was in business with this person. Not because he's a terrible person, but because politically he is definitely more corporate than I. So I say that because honestly, it is hard as a media company growing from the ground up. I mean, we're doing fairly well, but it's much slower this way. However, it is completely liberating. So what you described was a CNN producer having to run it up the flagpole, and they probably would have to go through 20 people, and they might get a yes, but even that yes would be some watered-down report that doesn't tell the real story, whereas I only answer to the viewer. And I think whether it's Status Quo or other outlets, that's why it's so important for people to support those outlets if it can't be financially, sharing, telling other people, spreading the word, because there really is an information war to get stories like Danny's out there. And I think it's super important, and that's why I brought that up, because CNN's job is not to cover it, it's to cover it up.
Yes, CNN's job is just like the pharmaceutical, just like the insurance, their job is to make money.
Yes.
Yeah. Making money doesn't go well with Medicare for all.
Yes.
That hurts the insurance companies that pay their bills. That hurts the pharmaceutical companies that pay their bills. You know, they're not for us, like I said earlier. They're for their money.
Right. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you, David.
We'll keep in touch. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.
Status quo.
That was Scott Desnoyers, father of Danny, who unfortunately is not with us anymore because his for-profit healthcare company discontinued his healthcare over $20. And as a result, he got so depressed and ultimately suicidal, he killed himself. This is basically the ugly face of capitalism. And, you know, personal story, nowhere near that, but I just got like a $550 bill in the mail. $550 bill. Frankly, Status Quo is growing, but I have been taking very little as the CEO of Status Quo so that it can grow. So I don't really have like a stable amount that I take every month. I take basically what is left over, if anything. There's been months I haven't taken anything, any amount, and just living off savings so that this could grow. So I got a $550 bill in the mail from, I got an endoscopy done in December of last year. It's when they stick a camera down your throat to like check your stomach, see what's going on, because I was having like digestive issues. So I said, why do I have a $550 bill? I had insurance at the time. So I called the company on the bill, and they tell me, you had a deductible. You had a deductible. I said, a deductible? It's December. I met my deductible months ago. And then they tell me, oh, well, it might be co-insurance then. I said, co-insurance? I have health insurance. Isn't co-insurance cost $550 for a endoscopy? An outpatient procedure? So I went back and forth and I said, all right, well, I can't pay this. I'll give you $5 a week, which legally, nothing they can do about that as long as I agree to pay that $5 a week. But really, what that co-insurance or deductible or whatever, really what that is money going to these pharmaceutical companies, CEOs, and shareholders. That's it. It's not going to anything of value. It's not going to anything necessary for communities, necessary for our civilization. It's all going so that these CEOs and these shareholders can be millionaires and millionaires and multimillionaires and then billionaires. That's what deductibles are. That's what co-insurance are. That's what co-pays are. They're not necessary things needed in a civilized country, and you don't need them, and they shouldn't be in society. Healthcare should be a right that is baked into what we do as a society for our people. So whether it's physical health, like a $550 bill for healthcare, or a for-profit company like Fidelis just, taking the rug out from under Scott's son's feet, canceling his health insurance because he owed $20, and I guess they sent a letter in the mail to his home, but he wasn't living at that house anymore. I mean, it's beyond barbaric. It's sick. Absolutely sick. And on this Labor Day weekend marathon, remember, I'm renaming this. It's not Labor Day. This is Oligarchy Day. We barely have a labor movement in this country. I want to play one more clip from when I was in the field covering the General Motors layoffs, because I think these workers are ironically, they have no face in this video because we had to black out their faces. These are union workers who are so scared of General Motors, so scared of Fiat Chrysler, so scared of even their unions. Their unions they're intimidated by. They don't want to go on camera. So we blacked out their face. But listen to these workers and what they deal with and their profound words on capitalism. And by the way, we're $491 away from $69,000 raised. I would love to hit $69,000 before I sign off today. If there's some heavy hitters, some people that have some extra dough, this money that you are donating to us, this money is going so we could get back out on the road and do more stories like the one I just did with Scott. We want to cover these stories in the field, not just from where we live. So if you got a couple bucks or more than a couple bucks, that's where you put it. GoFundMe. I'll put the link one more time into the super chat. Let's keep it coming if you can. We've raised a couple hundred today, but we got to raise a little bit more. I would like to get to that $69,000 today. But here is just one more. If you've seen this clip already, my apologies. If you haven't, here's one more example of this disease, which is capitalism. And this disease, which is a legalized auction of our government to corporations. What would make these greedy, they're greedy. What would make these greedy executives and shareholders more money? Immediately, $10.6 billion in stock buybacks. They've done $10.6 billion since 2015 in stock buybacks. That enriches the executives who are largely paid in stock. It also enriches investors. I think you could train folks probably for a fraction of that. So you have more trained people in Detroit and Lordstown, and it affects Ontario, Canada too. I think a plant in Maryland's closing down. You got more trained people. You get better output. Maybe they train them in electric. Maybe they train them in automated. Maybe they train them in self-driving ride share, because I know the automakers want to get into that. Wouldn't that produce more and then overall long-term equal more profit for General Motors or Chrysler Fiat?
One thing I think corporations look at, and I know they look at their stockholders. The stockholders operate on quarterly basis. Yes. Show me where we're making profits quarterly. And yeah, they do develop 5-year plans, 10-year plans, but those plans are never in the interest of the workforce and how it's going to affect the worker who's making the profits for them. It only focuses on the profit and the profit margin. And I think that's a flawed way of thinking, because at some point you're going to people who buy these vehicles right now, is the workers. It's the blue-collar worker. That's who buys cars majority of the time. Most of the wealthy cars are sponsored to them, given to them, or they lease to them, or some other way they're getting, or they're not buying American cars at all, to be honest. What sustains the auto market is the blue-collar worker. So if you take them out of it, then you have to start saying, well, where's my sales going to come 10, 20 years ago? And now you're looking at long-term profit margins dipping, right? And after you save so much out of eliminating the worker out of it, that's exactly what's going to happen. Instead of looking at quarterly base, I didn't look a little bit further than that, or a little bit more deeper, I should say, on that statement there.
And then again, we go back to the prick, in the skin. A lot of times we're destroyed before we even get started. And what I mean by that is, big companies, they control the scenario. So no matter which way I move, you control what the outcome. You determine how this ends for me. So in order to change the whole perspective of the conversation is to be the person at the table with the decision makers. Because ultimately I would say we all earn a good living, and it's not something they gave. It's something that we fought for. It's a lot of people that died, lost families, to make sure that we're able to sit here in the position that we're in. But the problem is, every 4 years, we have to sit back and wait for someone else to decide how I'm going to live the next 4 years. So is that truly free? This American dream that they say is to know that somebody have my way of life in their hands every 4 years. So we have to look at this from a whole different set of eyes. The training has to be put to the new people that's coming in, that we want to see that at the table. We want to be there when the whole concept of what you're going to do with us is being discussed. I want to be a part of that conversation. I don't want you coming back telling me what you're going to give me. I want to be there when you conceive it, when you're planning and you got that board and your projections. I want to be there. And if we ever going to transcend or change what we're seeing now, we have to be a part of that conversation. And I think that will promote the proper training that we're talking about for these vehicles that's coming and different ideas, because now I have firsthand knowledge of what it is you expect from me as a worker. And then I could be there to combat it on that level, a conception level. And then I think only then this will really start to balance out. But I think we will always be playing catch up. And to piggyback on my brothers over here about the whole GM thing, I mean, to just put people out of work because you understand that negotiations is coming. I mean, that's just evil. I mean, really, that's just evil. To know that you didn't have to do that, but you did it for the sake of the bottom line for the shareholders. At the end of the day, how can I make them happy? But if you truly research these shareholders, they own more than what we see. They have a stake on the layoffs. They have stakes in profitability. They make money no matter which way, again, this scenario works out, because they position themselves for that. So I think that once we combat that on that level, at being at the table, a lot of that will change. And that's just giving us more of a voice.
Last question for you two, because I want to swap in some others. What he was saying, what is the role of government in this? You look back to the Flint sit-down strikes. FDR didn't interfere. He let the strikers continue. I don't remember his name, but the governor of Michigan didn't, send in the National Guard to break it up. And they might have not forced GM's hand directly, but they definitely weren't on the side of GM. I mean, obviously Trump, it's all talk. He's not going to actually do anything. But the new governor, Whitmer, local politicians, does there need to be talk of actually regulations on corporations, how many jobs they could offshore? Obviously, a bigger problem is these politicians are all taking money from General Motors, from Wall Street, from all this. So what's the role of government? Because obviously our government has been hijacked by corporations, but you're starting to see a progressive movement fight back against that, whether it's Bernie or Ocasio-Cortez or Black Lives Matter or Standing Rock. There's a lot of movement. What do we need to force by way of government, because we have a presidential election coming up and that conversation coming?
Well, I don't believe in a socialist environment, first thing. I don't. I respect the message that Bernie Sanders and some other politicians put out there, but I don't believe in socialism. But I do believe, and I don't think government should be fully involved with business. But I do think they have some responsibility to hold corporations accountable. And I think they should make it attractive for corporations to want to stay here in America. I know we live in a global industry right now, so it crosses across the seas all the time. But the tax incentives for people to stay here, Michigan, for example, we lost a ton of business, right? And we were an automaker state. The incentives to stay here and build here are not there supported with a long time commitment that you're going to be here and it's signed on a written dotted line. Just like when the Obama bailout came in for the automakers. Was there a commitment, not a 5 year until you pay this money back? Was there a commitment for, hey, once you come out of this, now can we expect you to build plants in the state of Michigan to support the workers that are here in Michigan? Those are the things that I think the government should get involved in, especially if they're funding, because the funding is coming from the taxpayers. If you look at the city of Detroit, every automaker has pretty much left Detroit, except for FCA. FCA has the JNAP plant down there, and I believe there's some talks about building another plant, which is a positive. But Detroit and those two plants, which is within a 3-mile radius of each other, is a small speck on the big spectrum of things that's happening here. So I think the government needs to get really involved with the tax abatements. I know it goes down to state levels, but it needs to be supported by the federal level. I think good faith bargaining. Once you have those battles between the union and corporations, we come to the table and we negotiate. It has to be some good faith bargaining and some accountability that comes out of that good faith bargaining. Meaning, hey, once we make this agreement, there's not a side agreement that, hey, we reach this level, we're going to do this. It's either you're in it to win it or you're not. Because if you always have a side agreement, it gives you an escape clause. And the workers here don't have an escape clause. I go back to the temps, and I hate to keep going back to that topic that we just had. That was an escape clause in this last contract for the corporation. The escape clause was before TBTs or temps were only allowed to work certain days. Now the new contract states that, hey, they can work as many and as much as necessary, which allows them to, as my counterpart said over here, to work 40, 50, 60 hours. Those things hurt us in the end of the day because now if we don't send it over to Mexico or to our off-seas, we're going to do the same wages here at a lower scale with a cheaper workforce and just get rid of the legacy costs that came with everybody that put in the blood, sweat, and tears to work there.
Okay. I can't let you say that without, we already have a socialist country. It's for the rich.
You're absolutely right.
So, at the end of the day, I really think that a lot of the big executives in the government, is an attack on the union. They don't want a union at all. Our wages, our benefits, they don't want that because it's more cost to them. So at the end of the day, as far as like pensions, a lot of people would like to see in this next contract is them to fight for pensions for the full-time work, for all the full-time workers now. And right now it looks like the companies, they don't want that. And all companies, they're trying to get away from pensions because we want you to work forever, basically. Our at the big executives, they say, hey, my families, my grandkids, they're set for life. Because I'm a billionaire, I'm a millionaire, I'm good. But the working, class, Americans, we need a pension. We can't work for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and then we retire and then, we die off, you know what I'm saying? Instead of retiring at for 50, 60 and then being able to relax, go on vacations and enjoy our pension with our grandkids,
Yeah, I think it all was like, not to bring up again what the TPTs, but it's temporary employees. All that, piggyback off what he said, it was like the reverse of Mexico. We sending it down to Mexico, but, for cheap labor. Then all of a sudden we reverse it back here, hire people in after you give out a bunch of buyouts and everything for people to leave the plant. People was thinking, then you create this mass hysteria where, oh my God, the bottom's about to fall out of the industry. So people start running for the hills, and then they didn't know they was going to the valleys. As they was running, as more and more they ran away from it and everything, it opened up the door to allow the people to come in, hence to do the job for 5 years as a temporary, and then, you're getting 15 again, $15 an hour. You give them a raise and everything, make them feel good and stuff like that, but you winning in the long run because where's the medical? You know, they got kids. They got families to take care of. Some of them even told me they was doing it for 8 years. And I think the government... No benefits? No, limited. So that's when you say limited, it's really limited. So I think the government, they looked at it like this. Okay, when it became a right to work state, I think that it really was a systematic, corruption in the inside of our whole industry. Then the mass hysteria came when we went up there on Capitol Hill. They nitpicked everything from the fact that anybody paid attention back then was, how did you guys get here? They said, well, we flew planes. They said, why y'all didn't drive cars? Y'all made cars. That's how idiotic it got on Capitol Hill. So you wanted me to drive from Detroit to Washington, and I can get on a plane. Oh, well, why you didn't get on a public plane? They made it look like that for all of us to believe that, oh my God, they are stealing. They are. We know they are. We know what they're doing. They turn around. They get kickbacks all the time, and I think that they would get the kickbacks from. You turn around, you pay this person. This person gets in office. This person carries out your agenda. And that's what's going on. And it's constantly happening. It's going to continue to happen because you turn around, look at the Trump administration right now. Like you say, make America great. I don't know when that's going to happen. But meanwhile, they need to focus on making America right now because it's a lot of stuff that's going on that's in the underbelly that's killing all our unions off. And I tell you, and it's dividing us because the workforce, you have temporaries, and then you have the full-times, and then you have the people who are traditional. So now you have 3 tiers, really, tell you the truth, because the traditionals they got a pension. Yep. And so then you turn around and you got the people under them. Okay, I'm gonna get the money. I've been here for a while, but I better put my money up in my 401k. So now you got the next tier where you got the people that's trying to get in the door. And meanwhile, they dividing every last one of them along the step of the way by nitpicking. And then, from putting temporaries to do jobs that's not really jobs. You know what I mean? And everything to just utilize the workforce in a negative way and make the union be fighting constantly for things that are so petty to distract you away from the overall thing, which is at the end of the day, capitalism. They were all about the money. At the end of the day, it's all about money. And as long as we work for this, I've been working for this industry, I have never seen it like it is now. And it's going to keep getting worse unless there's something changed at the top. And that's where the government has to step in. If the government doesn't step in, it's going to keep going downhill. I don't know when that governor or that president that's going to get in there and say enough is enough. If they got somebody that's going to be on the ballot this upcoming time, everybody need to get behind them and vote, but I just haven't seen it yet.
Capitalism. All about the money. All about the money. Couldn't have said it better myself. So that was when we were in Detroit, covering the layoffs of General Motors. Those were workers from Fiat Chrysler who also were seeing layoffs. We blacked out their face because they could have faced retaliation from their union for going on camera and speaking to us. They also, General Motors would have retaliated probably against the union as well. So that's why we blacked out their faces. But this is the kind of stuff happening all over the United Corporations of America. All over the United Corporations of America. And at a certain point, you got to ask, when does it end? And that's why I headlined this live stream, is Bernie Sanders' campaign the last stand for workers? Because honestly, it's only getting worse. The rich are only getting richer. Corporations are only buying our government off more and more. The Supreme Court is basically a tool of corporations anyway. And most of these Democratic candidates are faux progressives, who are really tools of corporate America and pharmaceutical companies and General Motors and the rest of them. Terrible. Update you, we are now at $68,518. So that would be $482. $482 away from $69,000. I would love to raise $482 in the next half hour. Think that's probably how much longer I'll go for. If you got a couple bucks, we really appreciate the donations. Keep them coming. Thank you to everyone who has donated. Gene, $9. Aaron, $20. 10 from Dave. Ruth, several others I already mentioned. Keep it coming. This is the money we need to keep going in the field. We'd like to get back out in the field this month. It is September 1st, both on the campaign trail as well as for other stories. So even if it's $5, every amount counts. So keep it coming. I now toss to Jen, president of Status Quo, who has a very important story. As you know, the media covers it here and there, but not as much as they should. The Amazon is on fire, which is kind of important. If the Amazon continues to burn, the United Nations report said we got 12 years till absolute planetary destruction, but the Amazon is called the lungs of the earth for a reason. And if the Amazon continues to burn, that 12 years might turn into worse. That 12 years might turn into less time. And all of this that we're talking about, workers fighting back, putting an end to the capitalist Death Star, none of it really matters if we don't have an inhabitable planet. I'll definitely say that. So Jen has a report because as the Amazon burns, of course, people are making money off of it. Because these people are sociopaths. There are sociopaths in our government. There are sociopaths that are donating to our politicians, both Republican and Democratic politicians. And there's even people making tons and tons of money off of the destruction of the Amazon forest in Brazil. Keep it coming in the GoFundMe if you can. We're also two Status Quo members away from getting back to 700. We were at 700, and then we had a couple cancellations. Usually happens as the month closes and people need to cut corners in their budget. So we'd love to get 2 more members while I'm live. Let's take a look at Jen's report on the destruction of the Amazon forest and, of course, who's profiting.
Hey there, it's Jen coming to you today with kind of a weird lighting situation. It's the morning, I'm sitting by a window, there are beams of light hitting just half of my face at various times. I have a light in front of me, I have part of my book collection behind me. One of these days we'll have enough funding to beef up my studio situation. We're doing that slowly with Jordan and his apartment now. But I think we can all agree that what's most important are the stories. And today I have a doozy for you. It has to do with a corrupt company, corrupt politicians, and the destruction of the earth as we know it. So let's get right into it. We're going to start off with an article by Ryan Grimm, who does a lot of good work. This is in The Intercept, and I highly recommend that you read along with me as I go through this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's a lot of nuance here, but we will cover the major highlights and exactly what is going on with this company, Blackstone, one of its founders, Stephen Schwarzman, and his influence with Trump and McConnell, and the company as a whole's influence with a variety of politicians, including some of the favorite Democratic frontrunners for the presidency. A top financier of Trump and McConnell is a driving force behind Amazon deforestation. 2 Brazilian firms owned by a top donor to President Donald Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are significantly responsible for the ongoing destruction of the Amazon rainforest, carnage that has developed into raging fires that have captivated global attention. The companies have wrested control of land, deforested it, and helped to build a controversial highway to their new terminal in the one-time jungle, all to facilitate the cultivation and export of grains and soybeans. The shipping terminal at Marituba, deep in the Amazon in the Brazilian state of Pará, helps growers to load soybeans on barges, which will then sail to a larger port before the cargo is shipped around the world. What Ryan is talking about right there is the fact that large portions of the Amazon rainforest are being cut down in order to make way for farming, for agriculture, in particular grains and soybeans. So they're chopping down parts of the Amazon rainforest in order to grow these crops. Part of the problem with that, and Ryan Grimm goes into this in a video he did, I'm not sure if he does in this article, is that these crops are only profitable for about 10 to 15 years before the land is no longer able to be profitable. You know, I assume it's that they're no longer able to grow the crops there anymore with this 10 to 15 year lifespan. So they're doing permanent damage to the Amazon rainforest in order to have short-term profits. And not only are they doing this with the crops, they are also deforesting in order to make new roads and pathways. And what they've done is cut these new pathways, these new roads, in order to transport the increased amounts of grains and soybeans in order to get them to port much more easily. So it's a multifaceted problem, and Blackstone is helping to finance it. Let's dive back into the article. The Amazon terminal is run by Hidrovia do Brasil, a company that is owned in large part by Blackstone. So that's going to be important to remember, is that Blackstone owns a heck of a lot of Hidrovia. Blackstone, again, is a major U.S. investment firm, a private equity firm. Another Blackstone company, Patria Investimentos, and excuse me if I mispronounce anything, I apologize, owns more than 50% of Hidrovia, while Blackstone itself directly owns an additional roughly 10% stake. Blackstone co-founder and CEO Stephen Schwarzman is a close ally of Trump and has donated millions of dollars to McConnell in recent years. Keep in mind that even though Schwarzman is a very close Trump friend, ally, advisor, it is not, the only problem is not that Schwarzman is giving lots of money and has lots of influence with the Trump administration. We are also going to go into the fact that this is happening with Democrats as well. It's a big, big problem, especially as we learn more about what Blackstone is doing in the Amazon. So Blackstone has given a comment here. Blackstone is committed to responsible environmental stewardship, the company said in a statement. This focus and dedication is embedded in every investment decision we make and guides how we conduct ourselves as operators. In this instance, while we do not have operating control, we know the company has made a significant reduction in overall carbon emissions through lower congestion and allowed the more efficient flow of agricultural goods by Brazilian farmers. What they are talking about there is the fact that now they have these new highways and roads, and they're able to more easily transport the grains and soybeans that are being cultivated. So they're trying to say that there are fewer carbon emissions because there are more roads. And great, we're saving the environment. Look, so Blackstone's really trying to paint a rosy picture here when there's no rosy picture to be had. Yeah, sure, it's true that they're cutting down on carbon emissions, but they're also deforesting for short-term profits at the same time. So they act like they're doing the world a good. They're doing something great for the world. They're not, by far. The port and highway have been deeply controversial in Brazil and were subjects of a 2016 investigation by The Intercept Brazil. So I'm not going to, again, read this whole thing, but they're talking about the fact that the Hidrovia had planned to continue improving and developing the roads. In the spring of 2019, the government of Jair Bolsonaro, elected in fall 2018, announced that Hidrovia would partner in the privatization and development of hundreds of miles of the BR-163. Developing the roadway itself causes deforestation, and again, the BR-163 is a highway. Developing the roadway itself causes deforestation, but more importantly, it helps make possible the broader transformation of the Amazon from jungle to farmland. So in addition to not really causing that much benefit to have fewer carbon emissions because of these more highways and less congestion, it's also causing more agribusiness to come, because if they now have these highways and these ports to make it easier to export and move the agriculture where they need it to go, they're going to cause more to come in. So that causes more deforestation, more devastation to the land, more impact to the environment. So the more roads they have, the more companies are going to come in and say, hey, we're going to take part in this agribusiness and we're going to deforest to do it. So it's not a good thing all the way around. Grimm talks about the fact that this highway has a marked effect on deforestation. And he goes into the history of what's going on here. I'm not going to read a lot about the history of Brazil, but just know that it has made a major shift to the right. And in this shift to the right has come more destruction of the rainforest, of the Amazon, and more of this agribusiness. And it's all around had a very devastating effect. And the indigenous population has pushed back. So they had, Ryan Grimm talks about that right here, where every year between 2004 and 2013, except for 2005, while deforestation in Amazonia as a whole fell, it increased in the region around this highway, the BR-163. So this sparked pushback from indigenous defenders of the Amazon. In March, Hidrovia admitted that its business had been slowed by increasing blockades on BR-163 as people put their bodies in front of the destruction. So that goes to show you that this highway, there's been pushback by the indigenous and I'm sure others. Still, the company is pushing forward. Hidrovia recently said that thanks to heavy investment, it planned to double its grain shipping capacity to 13 million tons. Grimm goes into what the Amazon is. Of course, it's the world's largest rainforest. It absorbs a significant amount of carbon dioxide, a major contributor to the climate crisis. The Amazon is so dense in vegetation that it produces something like a fifth of the world's oxygen supply. So the Amazon, of course, is extremely, extremely important. The effort to transform the Amazon from a rainforest into a source of agribusiness revenue is central to the conflict and linked to the fires raging out of control today. The leading edge of the invasion of the jungle is being cut by land grabbers who operate outside the law with chainsaws. These land grabbers then sell the newly cleared land to agribusiness concerns whose harvest is driven on the highway to the terminal before being exported. Again, Bolsonaro has long called, right-wing guy, Bolsonaro, has long called for the Amazon to be turned over to agribusiness and has rapidly defanged agencies responsible for protecting it. The land grabbers have become emboldened. With Bolsonaro, the invasions are worse and will continue to get worse. Francisco Umanari, a 42-year-old Apurina chief, told Alexander Zajic for a recent story in The Intercept. His project for the Amazon is agribusiness. Unless he is stopped, he'll run over our rights and allow a giant invasion of the forest. The land grabs are not new, but it's become a question of life and death. Fires in the Amazon have been producing devastation described as unprecedented, many of them lit by farmers and others looking to clear land for cultivation or grazing. Bolsonaro initially dismissed the fires as unworthy of serious attention. Several weeks ago, Bolsonaro fired a chief government scientist for a report on the rapid escalation of deforestation under Bolsonaro's administration, claiming that the numbers were fabricated. If the Amazon loses another fifth of its mass, it is at risk of a phenomenon known as dieback, where the forest becomes so dry that a vicious cascading cycle takes over, and it becomes beyond the reach of any subsequent human intervention or regret. So this is obviously a huge deal. I highly recommend that you read this article for more of the background, more of the background on the shift of Brazil to the right and the devastation that has caused to the Amazon as a result. So let's get into Blackstone Group CEO Steve Schwarzman. He's a founder of Blackstone. He owns roughly a fifth of the company. He is one of the richest men in the world. He's given generously to McConnell and Trump and to various super PACs. He's a Republican guy, and Schwarzman gives to Republicans. But again, we're going to go over the fact that Blackstone employees, including those who are higher up, have been giving to Democrats, Democratic causes, Democratic PACs, and even presidential candidates. Schwarzman, again, is a close friend and advisor to Trump. Just very right-wing, very entrenched in that. And Blackstone, who he's CEO of, is doing this, is funding this. They are pushing back, of course, but there's no defense, even though this is what they try to use as their defense. A Blackstone spokesperson noted that the fund only owns 9.3% of Hydrovia, but that ignores the 55.8% of Hydrovia that is owned by Patria Investmentos. On Hydrovia's website, Patria is described as a company in partnership with Blackstone, and it is known in the financial industry to be a Blackstone company. It quoted the company's chief economist assuring the public that descent into authoritarianism is exceedingly unlikely. That prediction has not borne out terribly well. So this is a November 2008 article in Private Equity News about Bolsonaro's election, which was headlined, "Blackstone's Patria, Brazilian democracy is not in danger." It quoted the company's chief economist assuring the public that descent into authoritarianism is exceedingly unlikely. I already read that part, but Blackstone appears to remain a strong supporter of Bolsonaro. The Brazilian president traveled to New York in May to be honored at a gala, which was sponsored by Refinitiv, a company majority owned by Blackstone. I think you get the picture. Blackstone is funding the devastation of the Amazon rainforest. It's one of its founders and its CEO, Steve Schwarzman, is very buddy-buddy with Trump. Blackstone seems very supportive of Bolsonaro, the right-wing government now in Brazil. And what we have as a result is the hunt for profits by cutting down the rainforest, putting in this, expanding this highway, roads, making it easier to transport grain, allowing these land grabbers to destroy the land, and having companies move in. It's a process by which the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We have the indigenous community trying to fight back. We have people all around the world who are horrified by these fires, yet we have others who are lining their pockets, including Blackstone, including Steve Schwarzman. And it's a devastating mess. And what I want to point out is that this company, Blackstone, is not it's not only funding the right wing. It's not only causing damage, by the way, to the Amazon. They, as a private equity company, I could spend all day talking about the problems with Blackstone and what they've done to the U.S. and talking about Steve Schwarzman and everything that's going on. Private equity companies, by the way, that's what happened with Hahnemann Hospital. If you'll remember that I went in the field when Bernie was there at Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia, what had happened was that Hahnemann was bought by a private equity firm, and they ran it to the ground in order to sell it for parts. So these private equity firms, which is what Blackstone is, are kind of fly under the radar when a lot of people talk about corrupt, Wall Street and corrupt finance and all that. These private equity firms sometimes fly under the radar, but a lot of them do a lot of very, very bad things, from very local things like Hahnemann Hospital closing to, the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest and the subsequent environmental disaster that we are facing now. Schwarzman feels sorry for himself, though. I thought this was kind of funny, so I tossed it in here. Billionaire Trump advisor says he feels misunderstood. Stephen Schwarzman wants us to know who is doing PR for private equity. Private equity kingpin Stephen Schwarzman is worth an estimated $11.9 billion, has the ear of the President of the United States, dines on $400 stone crabs, regularly takes the time to dress up in costumes that must take hours to put on, I don't know what that's about, and was recently feted at a Palm Beach birthday party that featured trapeze artists, acrobats, live camels, Mongolian soldiers, Gwen Stefani singing Happy Birthday, and a giant birthday cake in the shape of a Chinese temple. In short, he has a lot of things going for him, but there's one thing that still bugs him: the ignorant public doesn't get how much good the private equity industry has done for the world. Per Reuters, ultra-wealthy private equity managers lamented their reputation as lousy corporate profiteers at a plush Beverly Hills hotel on Tuesday, arguing that their value to society was greater than the public realized. Stephen Schwarzman, chief executive and co-founder of the Blackstone Group, touted the fact that companies owned by his private equity business employed 600,000 people and had grown 50% faster on average than the S&P 500 index. The idea that you can do all that and have great success and be perceived at best in a marginal way in terms of contribution to society, you've really got to wonder who's doing the PR, Schwarzman said Tuesday at a panel at the Milken Institute Global Conference. People mistake us for financial people. I don't know exactly why, Schwarzman said, lamenting being lumped into the same group as filthy Wall Street bankers who don't actually own anything. If you had 600,000 employees, you might be a company, a responsible company, and that's what we are. As Reuters' Lawrence Delavine notes, private equity has earned a reputation for loading up companies with debt only to sell their assets, cut jobs, and take out profits. You get the picture. So I only point that out to say, like, this guy doesn't well, I think he understands what he's doing, but he thinks he's in the right. He's like, look at all these jobs I've created. He doesn't care that he's destroying the Amazon rainforest. Just a little aside there. And yeah, I read that those quotes very sarcastically in case you didn't notice, on purpose. Now, this I'm not going to go fully into, partially because I don't want to take up so much time, and the main point is Blackstone's connections to what's going on in the Amazon rainforest. But let's talk a little bit more about private equity. This is in the American Prospect by Jeff Hauser and Eleanor Egan. Private equity's next leverage buyout might be the Oval Office. Several candidates who have taken donor cash from private equity barons have remained silent about the threat posed by the industry. So the part that I wanted to talk about, yes, so here's what I've already mentioned. Earlier this month, one private equity firm drew particularly acute outrage when it announced it was closing Philadelphia's Hahnemann University Hospital in order to extract value from its well-located real estate. That, however, is just the tip of the iceberg. When private equity firms are not closing hospitals, they are acting as a driving force behind surprise medical billing, or they might be putting you out of a job. According to a new report from the Center for Popular Democracy and the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, private equity is responsible for destroying over 600,000 retail jobs in the last 10 years, triggering bankruptcies for iconic brands like Toys R Us and Sears. That 600,000 figure that Stephen Schwarzman was so excited about seems to be going the opposite way when it comes to, everyday real employees. Private equity could also be your landlord, having brought up 200,000 single-family homes during the foreclosure crisis. So this is not a report about private equity, but this is all to point out that, one second here. Although a handful of candidates like Sanders and Warren seem ready for the confrontation, and they're talking about between private equity or, towards private equity companies, other candidates have been much quieter about the threat posed by private equity. In the meantime, they have been happily accepting the industry's cash. In the second quarter, Joe Biden, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, and Kamala Harris have all received donations from one or both of the leaders of the country's top two private equity firms, Blackstone and the Carlyle Group. Buttigieg received max donations from 11 high-level Blackstone employees, as well as money from Bain Capital and Neuberger Berman. Biden, Booker, and Gillibrand nabbed donations from employees at least 3 of the top 15 private equity firms. So we'll drop that link for you to join. What we're going to do next is look at Blackstone specifically and what individuals from Blackstone who are part of Blackstone have given to certain presidential candidates. We already know Blackstone doesn't care about the environment. They're funding the devastation in the Amazon rainforest. They are supporting the very right-wing government, Bolsonaro, in Brazil, and very buddy-buddy with Trump. But what's going on with the Democrats? Let's take a look. First, I looked up Bernie Sanders, and Bernie does have one donation from a Blackstone employee at $250. I'm not ready to toss him to the wolves for that. Elizabeth Warren has a couple. One that's pretty high, $2,000. This is back in 2017, though. This isn't recent. This doesn't, it's not for her presidential campaign. But still, it's not great that that Blackstone Group employees felt comfortable donating this much to her, but it's by far not the worst. Next, we have Joe Biden, and there are recent Blackstone employee donations to Joe Biden. $1,000, the max of $2,800, $2,800 again, another $1,000 one, another $2,800 one. Blackstone GSO, I have to say, I'm not, Blackstone Group is their name. So I'm assuming that Blackstone GSO is the same as the Blackstone we're talking about, but it's possible that it's not, just as an aside there. And so Joe Biden, he's taking some money from what have to be some higher ups in Blackstone, people who are able to donate the max to a candidate. But it gets worse. Oh, I threw in Donald Trump here just to show you that Stephen Schwarzman has donated, of course, to Mr. Trump. Nothing new there. But look at this. Pete Buttigieg has all of these max donations from Blackstone employees. And that's because a Blackstone vice president held a fundraiser for him. Do you think Pete Buttigieg is going to be hard on Blackstone Group and private equity firms? No. It would appear that he would not be. And then we have Mr. Cory Booker, who over the years has taken a lot of money from Blackstone Group. Is Cory Booker going to be hard on Blackstone and private equity firms? No, probably not. That's a lot of money over a lot of years, a lot at the max contribution level. So this is multifaceted, of course. The major focus right now is the fact that Blackstone Group has its hands so deeply in what's going on with deforestation of the Amazon, and therefore the fires of the Amazon and what's happening there. There are protests against what's happening, and all Blackstone will do is put out these little statements about carbon emissions. No, it's not good enough. We know that they support the right-wing government, both in the United States and in Brazil. We know that financially, those who are well off, you have to be well off to make that max contribution, in my opinion, especially compared to, income in the United States. Those who are well off are donating to both Republicans and Democrats. There are some Democratic candidates who have taken a heck of a lot of money from Blackstone employees, including Buttigieg, who specifically had a vice president run a fundraiser for him where those donations poured right in from Blackstone employees. So on both sides, we have money controlling everything. We have these private equity firms who don't get as much attention as other, as Schwarzman was complaining that they were comparing him to those bad guys on Wall Street. Private equity firms sometimes slip through the cracks and they don't get as much attention. But clearly, as we see in the Amazon, they have a lot of impact. They have a lot of impact on politics and our politicians and around the world. And so I think shining a spotlight on that is important. Bravo to Ryan Grimm for that original reporting. And we really need to hold those candidates accountable who are accepting money from organizations or companies like Blackstone. So none of it good, all of it disappointing, but again, important to know about. I will have another report for you guys soon, and I hope you have a very good day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our email list. Go to statuscoup.com to do that. And also become a member, statuscoup.com/join. You'll get behind the scenes content and all kinds of good stuff. All right, bye-bye.
So, corruption has no bounds in the United Corporations of America. Blackstone is profiting off of the Amazon destruction and also giving tons of money to our president, Senate Majority Leader Mitch Massacre McConnell. That's been trending. And, of course, giving to Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, probably Kamala Harris, and I'm sure in the future, probably more to Elizabeth Warren, would be my best guess. So, great report by Jen. Before I end, I want to give you a little update. We didn't quite hit $69,000, so I will go cry myself to sleep tonight. We hit, we're at $68,528. So hopefully, when I get offline, there will be some people that donate to get that number up. I'd love to hit $69,000 because then it gets us even closer to that ultimate goal of $85,000. We'll definitely be pushing the GoFundMe a little bit more. I think we're going to revamp the GoFundMe page, which is kind of old, add some new stuff to it. Not like a grand reopening, but, you know, kind of fresh up the page a little bit more, because we definitely appreciate 1,531 of you who have donated so far, but we really got to get to that 85,000 so we can cover the rest of this campaign. Unlike others, we do not have fancy plutocrats funding status quo. We don't want fancy plutocrats funding status quo, so that's why we are asking our viewers to help us grow the media revolution. Oh, we just got a few more, excuse me. Thank you, Lawrence, $10 in the GoFundMe. Dante, $15 in the GoFundMe. $5, Patrick. So we're now at $68,548. So that would be $448 away. $448 from that $69,000. I'd love to hit $69,000 today, but I understand everybody has their limits and their budgets. So whatever you could do, we appreciate it. Even if there's a few of you that can leave that amount, that would be great. I think the point of going live today was to say, folks, at a certain point, the fight is over. If we don't start turning things around in this country very soon, and I'm saying in terms of who has the power in this country, the oligarchy was not formed overnight, and oligarchy will not go away overnight. But I think Bernie Sanders' campaign represents the best chance at finally unrigging this system to give labor, i.e. the workers, back the power. Because if we don't, you're only going to see this get a lot worse. Because that red line, it's not changing, it's getting worse. We do see more fight. We do see workers striking. We see teachers striking, fast food workers striking. But we don't see our politicians fighting. That's why Bernie Sanders is so refreshing. That's why so many progressives have some suspicions, have some doubt, or just don't buy what Elizabeth Warren is selling. Because when you say, I'm a capitalist to my bones, you're essentially saying capitalism overall does more good than bad. And by the last 40 years, I don't really know. I don't really know how you could say that. Oh, sorry, Dan. Dan. Well, it says Dante Grant here in GoFundMe, so that's why I called you Dante. Thank you, Dan Grant. That's why we are covering these critical stories and trying to give a voice to viewers, trying to give a voice to people rather than plutocrats, because the more you show real people's stories, the more you give a voice back to those that don't have one on CNN, MSNBC, and the pages of the New York Times, the Washington Post, Associated Press, Daily Beast, BuzzFeed, and all these pretend journalists, the more you wake people up to the legalized theft that is going on. When you have massive medical bills, when you have massive pharmaceutical bills, when you see the record profits these companies are making, that's not because they're so valuable. It's not because they're doing such great work for the communities. They're stealing your money, and the politicians are allowing them. This is essentially, the politicians serve as the getaway car to the United Corporations of America that are stealing your productivity, your wages, and making you struggle paycheck to paycheck, which is probably the reason we are now losing years on our life. The average life expectancy in America is going down and down and further down. Henry, one more time. Give him hell, Jordan. You are the real life Carl Kolchak. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for everybody who tuned in today. We went almost 4 hours, so pretty damn good day, pretty damn good marathon. It's September 1st. Hey, I don't mind doing a little birthday GoFundMe pity too. So 20 days till my birthday. So get your GoFundMe ready as a present. If you can't do it today, I'm happy to have it on September 20th, my birthday. So thank you for watching, folks. Thanks for that report, Jen. Thanks for all the donations. Again, keep it coming in the GoFundMe, whether we're on air or off air. Lights out tomorrow for Oligarchy Day, aka Labor Day, which I call Oligarchy Day. But I'll be back at it on Tuesday. Again, we want to get to 69,000. It would be wonderful to get to 69,000. Don't also forget, most of you are members. If you're not, statuscoup.com/join. That's a little outdated. We're now at 698 members. Love to get up to that 700. So the more people that become members, the less we have to do GoFundMe, the less we have to do these GoFundMes and crowdsourcing, because we'll have the sustainable money coming in every single month as a media company. Because we are a company and we need to grow in order to hire people, but also to get out in the field. So remember, most people are not lacking compassion in this United Corporations of America. Most people have no idea that it's turned into the United Corporations of America. That's why Status Quo exists. That's why we need your help to grow it. That's why we're not going to sell out and take help or money from plutocrats or the very people trying to shut down information, the very people trying to keep the truth hidden. Thank you for watching. We'll see you Tuesday.